Hello. Welcome to the Fanfic Majesty. If you want more content, you can follow me on Patreon. I will be uploading more content on there that will be exclusive. The link is in the description. Please support me. 10 is chapter 226 Shake the World. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Haiyuan calendar 1511. The event that shocked the world and changed the world ended at night in the Chambord Islands. The big event finally ended with the destruction of almost half of the Chambord Islands, on this day when everyone in the world was not prepared. In just a few hours, the Chambord Islands experienced a severe blow. First, the killing of the Tinlongren was broadcast live to the world, and then the Navy fought on the island, resulting in the destruction of half of the Yakuman mangroves, countless houses, countless facilities. As a result, when summarizing it afterwards, the world government deliberately evaded the words Dragon Man, and other words. This incident was collectively referred to as the Chambord Island Incident in the newspaper. After that, the ruins of the Chambordian Islands, with countless manpower, spent a few months before they barely returned to their original appearance. Although such a major event is over, however, the news that was delivered to the world in the newspaper afterwards once again shocked those who saw the newspaper. The live broadcast signal at that time was accidentally cut off in the middle of the live broadcast. People all over the world have only seen the incident that the Navy killed the Tinlongren in the first half, and the Navy turned into a monster in the second half, fighting with the Admiral and other navies, but it was not broadcast. Therefore, before seeing this newspaper, people all over the world assume that the Tinlongren incident will end with the main person of the incident being killed by the Navy on the spot. However, follow the news reports that occupy the entire newspaper and read it word by word. Advertisement cruelly killed the fallen navy of the world's noble Tinlongren, and its current whereabouts are unknown. For this reason, in order to arrest this vicious criminal, the criminal will be given a bounty as high as 1 billion berry. In addition, if anyone can provide any information about the criminal, a bonus of up to 100 million bell will be given. Depending on the importance of the message, rewards that exceed the limit may also be given. In general, this news report that spread across the sea told everyone that the person who killed the Tinlongren had not been caught or killed on the spot. In other words, after the man managed to kill the two Tinlongren, he could escape from the Chambordian Islands unharmed. The sea was silent. The sea was surprised. The sea is boiling. The Tinlongren were killed, and the people who killed the Tinlongren escaped alive. This fact that made everyone on the sea shudder, caused the whole sea to become noisy. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. This incident does not only mean how courage the person is, how strong he is. It also means that for hundreds of years, the lofty image and symbol of the Tianlong people was destroyed and obliterated by a navy who didn't know where it should be from their own camp. The people who have lived under the fear of the Tianlong people for a long time, seeing their objects that they can't wait for 1,000 swords day and night, wake up overnight and die too directly. They feel happy, they feel passionate. The shadow of the Sky Dragon shrouded the world. At the moment that the Navy killed the Sky Dragon, a gap was invisibly shrouded at this moment. Advertisement as the news about this is spreading more and more in the world, more and more people know that even in very remote small fishing villages, where few people are literate, some people have begun to know that the Tianlong people were killed by XX. The shadow that had been hanging over everyone's head seemed to disappear suddenly, and the blue skies seemed to become more transparent. On the misty road, at the same time, it seemed suddenly and cheerful. The navy that killed the Tinlongren opened the door to a new world for the oppressed people all over the world. Hayden opened the door to a new world for people all over the world. Although this door is not open enough for everyone to pass. However, with the efforts of people all over the world, one day, it can be expanded enough to pass everyone's width. And the lawless pirates who were in this boundless sea, looking at a navy reported in the newspaper, they even escaped after killing the Tinlongren. They laughed that they had never had it in their lives. Laughing out loud. And in a revolutionary army in a secret location, watching the accidental death of the Tianlong people in the newspaper, no one knows what changes will happen to their plans. Of course, the world government is clearly aware of what kind of counterattack this news will cause to themselves. But, in order to contain the fearful signs that made them think about it, they felt terrible about what might happen in the future. They not only offered a reward of up to 1 billion bell,
but also secretly sent all intelligence agencies to investigate the sea, posted the news. Even part of the Navy's forces were mobilized by them to collect intelligence. The Navy that had previously been related to Hayden had all been carefully checked to find out all the information about Hayden. However, there are high-level leaders such as Lieutenant General Karp, General Zepha, Lieutenant General Crane and General of the Warring States period, and the people of the world government have not known the lower-level seamen of Hayden. But, advertisement, his favorite islands, usual hobbies, places he wants to go, etc. In short, they might be able to analyze the information that appeared at Hayden's location, they all asked. However, these pieces of information are completely different. The intelligence work of the world government is very serious and careful, not letting go of any tiny details. However, just like before the exam, you know that you have to test 40 questions, and when the test papers are issued, you realize that you have to test 100 questions. The same goes for this. The devil shoe flying out of the Chambord Islands, after finding a direction at random, he kept flying all the time. After flying straight over the windless zone, flying straight over the invisible sea. Finally, in his line of sight, he saw a place that was regarded as a continent, not an island, and when the feeling of being locked in behind him had long since disappeared, he dared to relax his tense spirit. Then, without the demon shoe himself noticing it, he suddenly fell asleep during the flight, and then he fell from the air into the sea that was about to reach the land like a bird shot down by a stone. In this long-distance flight, he spent all his remaining strength. After spending almost 2 days, he finally came to this sea area called East China Sea. The devil shoe flew over almost a quarter of the sea area of One Piece's world, and came to the legendary, weakest East China Sea. This is almost impossible. Of course, no people from the world government came here to investigate. Moreover, the only yellow ape who could catch up with the devil shoe was thrown away by the devil shoe not long after chasing the Chambordian Islands. As a result, the devil's shadow disappeared from everyone's eyes, and it would be a long period of time. Chapter 227. After everything is settled. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. East China Sea, Kingdom of Goya. The coast of Windmill Village. One morning after the Chambord Island incident happened, about 4 days later. The golden sun is high above the blue sky, and the breeze in April and May blows gently. This day, on the endless sea, there is an unknown object, which is pushed ashore little by the tide. And on the shore called Windmill Village, there happened to be a kid walking along the shore. From the look of this kid walking, you can know the kid's irritable mood at the moment, and if you come close to him, you can still hear the broken thoughts in his mouth. Smelly Shanks. He refuses to take me out to sea again. Anyway, complaining about the various ills of the man named Shanks, repeating it back and forth. For the unwillingness to be entangled in his heart for not going out to sea, the more he thinks and the more mad, the more he thinks and the more mad. Humph! He suddenly yelled, and gas spurted from his big nostrils. Then he stared at the pebble on the ground in front of him, and kicked the pebble away fiercely. Puff! The kicked pebbles fell into the sea and made a sound. As the little stone moved his sight, he noticed that something seemed to be floating over the sea. Okay. The kid made a question from his nose, then squinted to look at the sea not far away. The next moment, his concentrated gaze immediately realized that it was a person floating on the sea. Ah! Someone there, the kid exclaimed as he pointed at the man. Advertisement. Subconsciously looking around, wanting to find an adult to help him rescue that person. Immediately afterwards, before he could think of a way, how to pull the man over, then a wave shot the man floating in the sea onto the beach. Bang bang bang. He hurried to the beach with his sandal feet, and after a while he ran to the person who was sent to the beach by the sea. Smelly. The kid shouted immediately, and couldn't help covering his nose. And it was Hayden who was relieved from the state of blur that floated ashore from the sea. The wounds all over his body were mixed with the smell of the sea that I didn't know about drifting on the sea for a few days, and he exuded a very foul smell. The kid looked at Hayden with injuries all over his body. He thought he had almost guessed that this person was in a shipwreck. Then, he saw 2 long knives tightly held in this man's hands. Although he likes these things very much, the life and death situation of the person in front of him is the most important. Seeing that this person still had a trace of breath, he anxiously performed operations on this person that he thought could save this person's life. Suddenly. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, puff. The kid seemed to have pressed some switch, and the man lying on the beach spouted a mouthful of seawater suddenly, followed by a violent cough. Hayden's consciousness suddenly woke up after 1,000 years of deep sleep. During the violent cough, he felt the real touch sent to him by his body, and he knew that he should have returned to the real world, or else he was still in the spiritual world. Same. The strong salty taste in his mouth let him know that he could never have been sent to the world of death by that demon. So what happened? As doubts arose in his heart, the coughing sensation gradually eased, and Hayden then turned his gaze to the person next to him. Hayden collided with the kid who had rescued him. Advertisement. The two of them stared with wide eyes, nostrils facing nostrils. "Boy? Smelly?" the two exclaimed at the same time. Hayden was surprised at the first person he saw. The kid gave Hayden abruptly, got up, stirred the smell on his body, and yelled. Hayden ignored the yelling little devil. He pulled off the seaweed that covered his sight, quickly checked the surrounding environment, and immediately began to probe the surrounding spiritual pressure. After a while, he came to this place. There is no Ryotsu worthy of his vigilance, and there is no existence of those terrifying Ryotsu. Hayden looked around and noticed that this was a coast where he didn't know the ghost place, and it was definitely not the Shambordian Islands before the memory fragment. "Boy, do you have a name? Do you know where this is?" Hayden continued to frown and check the surroundings, and asked casually that he seemed to be the kid who saved him. "My name is Lu Fei, and this is Windmill Village." The little devil, who was much shorter than Hayden, answered with a weird voice while pinching his nose. "Oh, Luffy." Hayden, who focused his attention on the surroundings, repeated what Luffy had said. The first time he didn't notice anything wrong. Suddenly, the atmosphere did not know how to be silent for a second. Hayden's movements while observing the surroundings suddenly stiffened. "Luffy?" He repeated it a second time, and at the same time focused his gaze on this honest little devil. "Yeah." Luffy nodded and replied, still pinching his nose. Luffy and Windmill Village. These two keywords were like lightning, and with a click, opened the memory of his One Piece in Hayden's heart. Cough, cough, cough. Advertisement. He was immediately frightened by these two words, pulled the wound on his body and couldn't help coughing violently. Suck. Suck. Hayden hurriedly took a few deep breaths, trying to calm down. At the same time, he also told himself in his heart. It doesn't matter, even if you don't know why you came to the East China Sea from the Chambord Islands, it doesn't matter. Although I don't know how his body escaped from Teacher Zephyr and the others after he fought the demon imaginarily. However, if he hadn't died in that situation, it shouldn't be a big problem if he came to the East China Sea. Hayden kept telling himself that everything was okay. Although my body is in tatters and wounds, as long as I am fine, these injuries should heal on their own within a few days. Now, let's follow Luffy in the little ghost era and find something to eat. Hayden thought to himself, inserting the two Zhanpak knives in his hand into a hole in his pants, just to block the knives and prevent the Zhanpak from slipping. Afterwards, he touched his deflated belly, looked down at Luffy and said, "Boy, can you take me to find something to eat?" 10 minutes later, Luffy took Hayden, who looked like a victim, and walked to the town of Windmill Village. In the midst of the discussions among the residents of the town, they stopped in front of a small tavern called Patysbar. "Seagrass people, the big sister here can give you something to eat." Lu Fei pinched his nose and said 1 meter away from Hayden. "I said, you kid don't call me the seaweed man." With a helpless expression on Hayden's face, he sighed. He also knew the unbearable and stinking appearance on his body now, but he didn't have a place to change it. Subsequently, Hayden embraced his kindness towards the tavern owner Magino, opened the door and walked in, hoping that she could give himself a bite of food and borrow the bathroom. Chapter 228 Tavern in Donghai Windmill Village. Next chapter. Advertisement crunch. The shutter door of the tavern in front of him was pushed open by Hayden. He was wet with an unpleasant smell, and then walked in. At a distance of 1 meter behind him, he followed a black-haired kid who was pinching his nose. "Sorry, we are closed this morning." A sweet sound like a crisp bell rang in the tavern. Because Hayden suddenly entered the Anbu environment, after blinking his eyes, he saw the tavern owner, Miss Marchino, who was behind the tavern bar at the moment. Her green hair was wrapped in a turban, and she was wiping the wine glass with a white rag in her hand. I'm sorry for that. Can you give me something to eat?" Hayden said embarrassedly. He had never thought that he would fall to this point. At this moment, he only felt his face straight hot. He looked like he had been in a shipwreck, and his belly rang out at this very moment. This miserable look was shown in the eyes of the kind-hearted Magino. Wait a minute. After Mackinaw was shocked, he immediately replied to Hayden. She probably understood what the person in front of her experienced. As she hurriedly turned back to the back kitchen to make food, she caught a glimpse of Luffy following Hayden. Did Luffy bring it? She thought to herself, and at the same time was happy that Luffy knew how to save people. Afterwards, while Mackinaw was preparing food, Hayden and Luffy sat on the high chairs at the bar. Although he opened his eyes and went to the legendary place and saw what the Son of the World was like when he was a child, he is really in a bad situation now that he can't be refreshed to satisfy his own curiosity. However, advertisement Luffy's curiosity, but seeing Hayden's appearance at the moment, grew stronger and stronger. Luffy was sitting on a high chair at a distance from Hayden. Only then did he take a good look at Hayden's current situation. The whole body was wounded, and the clothes were dirty and tattered. And on the side of this person, there was a horrible long knife wound, plus this person was still holding his 2 knives tightly even if he didn't realize it. These various abnormal factors reminded Luffy of the pirate he yearned for. Could this man be a pirate? Luffy thought of this with his little brain, and he immediately became excited. "Are you a pirate?" he then asked Hayden loudly, even letting go of the hand holding his nose. Hayden was shocked by the question. He pondered for a while and then said, "No, I am the sea." He just wanted to say that he was a navy, but he immediately recalled what had happened before. After killing 2 dragons, he seemed to be unable to continue to be a navy. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. I'm a pirate, right? Hayden said to Luffy hesitantly. "Since I escaped, I don't know how much the World Government Group will give me a bounty." He stared at the wine cabinet behind the bar in front of him, lost in thought. After a second, "Wow, really, are you that kind of powerful pirate? Do you know a pirate named Shanks? Advertisement. Did you become like this when you were defeated?" For a moment, Luffy's question was shot at Hayden like a machine gun. Stop, stop, stop. Hayden quickly stopped Luffy's growing problem. The chaos of his head and the feeling of exhaustion on the body, coupled with the noisy noise of Luffy, felt that his head was about to explode at this moment. However, Luffy's noise caused Hayden a headache, but he also learned a piece of news from Shanks. In other words, Shanks, who has not yet become the 4 emperors, is exactly the period of his stay in the East Sea. At the same time, Hayden also learned another news from this news. It seems that during this period of Shanks in the East China Sea, Lieutenant General Carp didn't seem to have seen Luffy much. In other words, I don't need to worry about the problem of Lieutenant General Carp hammering him to death for the time being. Sort out Hayden's current situation. Although I still don't know what kind of experience my body has experienced after being emptied by the devil, no matter how bad it is now, it shouldn't be a big problem. Hayden's nerves that had been tense since he woke up, as he sorted out the situation, even the injuries throughout his body seemed to ease. "Boy, I'll tell you when I fill my stomach," Hayden said perfunctory Luffy. Then, eagerly smelling the scent coming from behind the bar to his nose, "I didn't know how hungry for a few days," and happily played the song. Immediately afterwards, wow, heat suddenly came from the door opened behind the bar. A gastronomic scent that seemed to be only found in the skies suddenly swept Hayden like a storm. Even if Hayden is now making this tavern smell of sea, but this scent storm instantly dominates the space inside the tavern. However, this may just be an illusion of Hayden, who has not eaten for 3 or 4 days. Hayden looked at the large plate full of seafood risotto placed on the bar in front of him. Feeling the tangy fragrance, even though he couldn't help swallowing his saliva, he still stopped the first move to eat. Advertisement, "Sorry, I will clean these tables and chairs after this." Hayden motioned to Marquino with his eyes, and pointed to the chair and bar that had been wet from his wet body. "Oh, it's okay." Mackinaw was stunned by the politeness of the person in front of him, and quickly replied. Then Hayden gestured, and began to eat the seafood risotto in front of him. At the same time, while Hayden was eating, Mackinac began to chat with Lu Fei next to him. They were all about Luffy's discovery of Hayden. Afterwards, a burst of tableware collision continued to sound. In the chat between Mackinac and Luffy, in Hayden's windswept clouds. In the morning, there shouldn't be many taverns that would come, and the shutter door at the entrance was slammed open again. Boom. This time, listening to the sound of the door, the person pushing the door should be more emotional. The tavern owner Magino looked at the door reflexively. "Ah, the village chief. What are you doing here?" she asked when she saw someone coming. An old man with a striped fisherman hat on his head, round glasses hanging in front of his eyes, and a flowered shirt appeared at the door. There was no expression on his face at the moment, staring at the back of Hayden who was buried in his sight. Because, he heard some villagers come to report, saying that Luffy brought an outsider to the town, and that outsider was also carrying 2 samurai swords. As the village chief of Fengche village, it is his primary duty as a village chief to ensure the safety of everyone in the village. For suspicious foreign armed personnel, he must maintain the highest vigilance. The village chief named Up Slap stepped on heavy footsteps and walked to Hayden, who was no one beside him. "Report your name and purpose." The mayor of Fengche village slapped the tabletop of the bar abruptly and shouted in a deep voice. Chapter 229 Absolutely previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Boom. The bar table vibrated suddenly. The plate of seafood risotto that happened to be wiped out by Hayden was immediately photographed. Fortunately, Hayden had quick eyes and quick hands, and then grabbed the plate that was vacated, avoiding the end of falling and being broken. At this moment, the atmosphere suddenly became tense in the tavern. Hayden calmly turned to look at the person who was questioning his voice.
Then, I saw an old man with a serious face, staring at him closely, as if his answer did not satisfy him, he would be taken directly on the spot.
I was caught in a storm at sea," Hayden replied hesitantly. Responding with the answer he prepared in advance. Anyway, as long as he sees what he looks like now, as long as he adds one more sentence, it is easy for people to believe his statement. He thought to himself, this place seems to be in a remote location, it should be impossible for anyone to recognize his face, and there is no need for trouble. Difficult in Shanghai? The mayor of Fengche village couldn't help thinking in his heart, and at the same time, he also thought of the changing weather on the sea. He looked like he was shipwrecked. Looking at the man in front of him, the village head actually believed his statement about the shipwreck in his heart at this moment, but, "What's the matter with your 2 knives?" The village head then pointed to the 2 Zhanpakudao knives that Hayden was leaning on the bar counter and continued to ask. The tone of his speech did not change because he believed the man's statement. "I am a swordsman." Hayden replied simply and immediately. This question does not need to be compiled to answer, it is the same to tell the facts. The village chief was immediately overwhelmed by Hayden's straightforward answer. Cough, cough, cough. He clenched his fist to cover his nose and mouth and coughed twice. Then, just as he stared at Hayden's face, he was going to say something more. Advertisement. At this time, the mayor of Windmill Village looked at Hayden's face, and a face that frightened him suddenly flashed in his mind. Although Hayden's face is not clean now, but his facial features are basically the same as those reported in the newspaper that shocked the world that the village chief saw a few days ago. The village chief didn't know if there were 2 people with such similar appearances in this sea. But this guy with a troubled outfit, and then contacted the guy with a bounty as high as 1 billion bergs reported in the newspaper, is circling the world. It is difficult for the mayor of Fengche village not to connect Hayden at this moment with that person. Just as he thought about it more in his mind, the face of the person in the newspaper gradually overlapped with the face of the person in front of him. Bang! The mayor of Fengche village didn't say anything. He smashed the chair beside him, walked quickly to the signboard in the tavern next to him, and tore off the newspaper that reported the incident in the Chambord Islands a few days ago. Then, he quickly walked back to the confused Hayden trio. Snapped. The village chief slapped the newspaper on the bar in front of Hayden. Is the person above you? He asked seriously. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Behind the bar, Marquino felt that the village chief's reaction was a little strange. Luffy on the side was a little curious. He felt the tension in the atmosphere, so he quieted down subconsciously. At this moment, Hayden was confused by the village chief. So he picked up the newspaper photographed in front of him and began to look. As for the village chief, the next answer from the outsider is likely to determine the fate of the village. If this guy is the guy who killed the Tinlongren in the newspaper, then just coming here will bring this peaceful village the result of destruction. Although he killed the Tinlongren, however, the village head didn't know how to react to the complicated emotions. Advertisement for the village chief, who is very serious on the surface, but in his heart is actually a kind-hearted village chief. Faced with this situation, his first reaction, of course, was to drive away the outsiders who might be dangerous to the village. But the second reaction, since this guy is the original Navy, not a pirate, then his reason for killing the Sky Dragon. At this point in the village head's contemplation, Hayden also finished reading the newspaper from the previous few days. Finish reading this newspaper. Hayden's expression changed from being puzzled at the beginning to surprised, then from surprised to solemn, and then from solemn to expressionless. The front page of this newspaper shook his mind instantly. The newspaper reported that he had killed the Tinlongren, not to surprise him, but the pictures in the newspaper and the like. In order to highlight the ferocity and wickedness of the criminals who killed the Tinlongren, the world government took a bird's-eye view of the Shambordian Islands after the war. Download multiple photos. Although according to the ability of Imaginary, Hayden wanted to understand that the demon Imaginary might have arrived in the real world after defeating him, and it might also be the action of that thing that he could escape. But what does Ren Hayden think? He also did not expect that during this period of time when his consciousness was asleep, the demon Shu who was fighting with Teacher Zephyr and the others would directly destroy the Shambordian Islands. His own initial thoughts were not like this. The more Hayden looked, the more his face sank. In the beginning, he himself just wanted to run away immediately after killing the Tinlongren. Even when he was entangled with Teacher Zephyr and the others, he had never thought that the trouble would be so great. And this is almost an island-wide spread, Hayden can imagine. If you are aware of the power of the fighting between them in advance, those who can escape should basically be pirates with their own boats. Those who have nowhere to escape are basically local residents of the Shambordian Islands. There are not only people like pirates and navy in this world, but some ordinary people who just live a plain life every day also still exist. Advertisement Hayden could not imagine. What the hell did Demon Shu destroy? If it were to kill so many pirates, Hayden didn't care, he even wanted to laugh in his heart. But I don't know how many innocent people were imaginary by the devil. Devil Shu is one with him, and he did it himself. If one's own strength at the time was stronger than the demon virtual, there would be no need for the current result. Thinking of this, Hayden lost his expression on his face. In the eyes of Mackinaw and the village chief. At this moment, the feeling that the outsider in front of them gave them was sinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, although it was impossible, the village chief saw that this person was silent, and he understood that probably things were the same as he thought now. Of course, Mackinaw has also read this newspaper that almost everyone in the world has read. Seeing the strange behavior of the village chief and this person's reaction, she immediately understood the situation at the moment, but she understood that it would be better for her to speak less. Squeak, the high chair made a sound on the wooden floor. Hayden put down the newspaper in silence, got up and pushed back his chair. After reading the newspaper, he understood the seriousness of the matter now. If he is still staying here, he will naturally affect the people who come to this village, and he does not intend to affect this place. So Hayden didn't intend to say more. Subsequently, in the eyes of the confused Luffy, the worried Miss Mackinaw, and the tangled head of the village, Hayden started to walk outside the tavern step by step. Chapter 230 See Calendar 1512 Advertisement, and many more. Suddenly, the tangled head of the village shouted. The village chief, who was very distressed by the current situation, looked at Hayden's miserable appearance, coupled with his temperament that could not be expressed in words at the moment. The mayor of Fengchechen felt in his heart and made a decision that made him unable to judge right or wrong. He decided to help Hayden. Okay? Hayden frowned and looked behind him. Then, he saw the mayor of Windmill Village continue to say. You should have nowhere to go now. You can stay with us for a while, but not in this town. The mayor of Fengche Village endured great danger and extended a helping hand to Hayden in front of him. Hayden was taken aback by the meaning of this sentence. Since the village chief just showed him the newspaper, he should also understand his current situation. But is this old man really wanting to die? Are you still planning to help him in this situation? To be honest, with a reward of 1 billion Baileys, Hayden didn't dare to run around, and he didn't know where to hide. Because, even if the news of his existence was revealed a little, then the Tinlongren side would most likely send a general or the like over again. After the Battle of the Chambord Islands, Hayden knew that he was far from the general in strength. If the situation on the Chambord Islands were to happen again, with the existence of the Devil Void, he might not die, but his place might be destroyed. Before he had the strength to be able to be a pair of generals, Hayden decided that he would never show up in the sea. He still doesn't want to die young, and he doesn't want to play the end before he officially reaches adulthood in a few months. But, advertisement Hayden thought about the possibility of hiding in this remote place. Since this is the legendary Windmill Village, then Lieutenant General Carp would come back here from time to time to take a look at Luffy. People on the side of the world government should not be too careful to search this area. As for Lieutenant General Carp's problem, as long as he finds out in advance and avoids him, there is nothing to be vigilant about. Hayden thought about the possibility of hiding in the East China Sea. Then, he looked at the village chief of Fengche village who was standing in front of the bar at the moment and said, "Thank you." The implication was that he accepted the village chief's kindness. Hearing this answer, the village head seemed to have done a violent exercise just now, and sweat oozes out of his forehead uncontrollably. He wiped off the sweat beads that appeared on his forehead, ignoring Mackinaw and Luffy on the side, strode towards Hayden's position. "Now you have to cover your face so that no one else can see it," the village chief urged Hayden in a somewhat anxious tone. While speaking, he took off his fisherman's hat from his head, suddenly jumped up, and buckled his hat on Hayden's head. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Then he pulled the brim down hard to cover Hayden's face as much as possible. The village chief who had done all this in Hayden's sluggishness, he turned around and turned in the direction of Mackinaw and Luffy and then said, "Marquino, I can't tell anyone what happened today, and you, Luffy." The village chief's expression was very serious when he spoke, and the aura on his body made Mackinaw and Luffy both nod their heads in accordance with this aura. The village head understood that he should hide Hayden as soon as possible. Now it is less than a few days before the thing that this guy has done is over. Since he can remember the looks of this guy, other people are likely to think of it. The tense village chief then pulled Hayden out of the tavern. Then, advertisement he took Hayden along the street quickly, while explaining his method clearly to Hayden. Since you are the original Navy, you shouldn't have a problem living in the forest for a few months. Now I will take you to Mount Colpo, where you can hide there for a few months and wait until your news calms down before coming out. There are beasts and water in the mountains, and I will send you the necessities of life on time. While the village chief informed Hayden of the necessary conditions, he took Hayden to the Colpo Mountains where they were. That's all. With the help of the mayor of Windmill Village, Hayden temporarily settled in the Colpo Mountains. Time flies, months of time pass in a flash. The waves caused by the killing of the Tinlongren in the Great Sea finally calmed down as time passed. Of course, the calm of all this is only the calm on the surface. The Tianlong people will not be satisfied with this result. They haven't found that person for a few months, and the world government will also not be satisfied with this result. Then, the progress of the world continues to move forward without stopping, and will not stop for any one person. During Hayden's temporary residence in the Colpo Mountains for a while, although the mountains surrounding the Goa Kingdom, the country where the Windmill Village belongs, are large, Hayden still met Ace and Sabo as a child. However, when he noticed the presence of the two little ghosts, he avoided, of course, also avoided the area where the three brothers Luffy's foster mother was when he was a child. There is no need to let too many people know about their own existence. If the two little ghosts accidentally tell anyone, then things will be really bad. Then, time in Hayden's continuous practice, inadvertently, has always come to the Haiyuan calendar 1512. Advertisement. I don't know how long he has stayed in this mountain. For so long, Hayden has been living the life of an otaku in the mountain. Every day he rises up and rests at sunset, repeating what he did yesterday. In order not to affect Windmill Village and wherever he intends to go, Hayden has been enduring this boring life. Until one morning I woke up. Inexplicable and unreasonable, he couldn't stand it anymore. On this day, it happened to be beautiful. The pale blue sky is cloudless, and the earth is shrouded in silk domes. And so long has passed. Hayden's injuries, large and small, have long since healed. However, what he didn't understand was actually the horrible knife wound left by Rayleigh. Even if it recovered, it still left him with a long scar. It seemed to be warning him, warning of the result of his lack of strength. Thought of this silently. Hayden, wearing a floral shirt, subconsciously touched the stab wound on his cheek, then put on a straw hat expressionlessly, and began to walk towards the windmill village. At the same time, just when Hayden, who was about to become a savage on the mountain, began to walk towards the windmill village below the mountain. On the edge of the port of Windmill Village, a roaring noise was heard on a three-masted sailing ship with a dragon-head bow and a black pirate flag hung on the mast in the harbor. As for Luffy, he was standing on the bow of the ship with a knife, looking aggressively at a group of people standing on the deck. Chapter 231 Redhead Shanks Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement, "Hey, Luffy, what do you want to do?" The person standing on the deck asked Luffy. Humph. Luffy vented his nostrils and ignored the man. Then, he raised the knife in his hand to his eyes, and he shouted at the people standing on the deck like a demonstration. "I'm not playing around, I have had enough, I want to prove it to you." While talking, he held the knife in his hand and was about to make some dangerous moves. And the group of pirates on the deck didn't realize what Luffy was planning to do next, or didn't believe that Luffy had the courage to do it. They were still standing on the deck without going alone to stop Luffy from holding the knife. Even a red-haired pirate with a straw hat on his head provokes Luffy, saying that he dare not do something like that. Immediately afterwards, Luffy watched everyone underestimate his expression, and he couldn't control that much. He made up his mind, and after a big grunt, he made a wound on his face with the knife in his hand, unconvinced. No, at this moment, the pirates on the deck were all stupid immediately. The red-haired pirate wearing a straw hat rushed up and stopped Luffy from cutting himself. At the same time, he yelled at this little devil who would dare to behave just as he said it. Advertisement after a farce on the ship.
The red-haired pirate brought his crew and Luffy to the tavern in the town of Windmill, which is the tavern opened by Miss Mackinaw. This is the meeting place of their redhead pirates in this small town.
Brothers, cheers, to Luffy's courage, to our great journey. A group of pirates of different styles, with the same brilliant smiles on their faces, held up their beer glasses to celebrate, for any reason they could think of. The small tavern was fully occupied by the crew of the red-haired pirates. The tavern was filled with unrestrained laughter and the sound of drinking and gurgling. Luffy was sitting on the chair at the bar at this time, and the wound he had drawn just now had been treated, but... "Wow, it didn't hurt at all just now," Luffy said with tears in his eyes, words that were obviously different from what he felt. "Idiot. You are not allowed to do such silly things in the future." The red-haired pirate immediately yelled and scolded beside him. At this time, outside the tavern, Hayden coming down from Mount Kolbo. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. With a straw hat on his head, a floral shirt on his upper body, and a pair of beach pants on his lower body, Hayden stood at the entrance of the tavern and stopped with two zipper knives on his waist.
Is the tavern at this time so lively? Standing at the door, Hayden couldn't help but question. It seems it's only morning. Do people in this town like to drink so much?
Feeling puzzled, Hayden then left the doubts behind his head. He went straight to the tavern when he descended from the mountain, but it was not to entangle these details. Although this was the second time he came to this tavern, the memories of the first time he came to this tavern kept him lingering in his heart. That plate of seafood risotto. When he was sent to him when he was most hungry, the unspeakable feeling really made him unforgettable. Hayden stood outside the door and couldn't see the details of the tavern inside, but he felt that after so long, plus his current appearance, there shouldn't be anything to think of him. Advertisement. With this reason in mind, Hayden opened the shutter door and walked into a lively place that shouldn't have been in. Crunch. The moving shutter door made a very eye-catching sound. The pirates who filled the tavern subconsciously glanced at the doorway. Also doing the same thing, the owner of the tavern, Miss Marquino, and Luffy. Then I saw a man dressed as a beach tourist, wearing a straw hat with his head down, showing only a delicately repaired beard, walked into the tavern and instantly attracted everyone's attention. The reason for the attention was that the two samurai swords that were slightly inconsistent with this outfit were hung on the side of this person's waist. But this strange person only caught the attention of the red-haired pirates for a second, and they continued with the things before this person walked in, drinking and eating meat. He felt several pairs of strange gazes focusing on him, and Hayden did not speak. In order to avoid being noticed by others as much as possible, he lowered his head and kept an angle just enough to see the road and walked to the bar. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Hayden stepped slowly towards the bar. But the sound of his footsteps is very attractive in this unusually noisy environment. Hayden walked to the bar, raised his face hidden by the straw hat, and looked at the tavern owner Marshino, who was pouring wine behind the bar. "Miss Mackinac, long time no see. Okay?" Markino raised her head suspiciously, pouring her head down, and looked at the person she greeted. "Have I ever seen this person?" She was surprised, still keeping a gentle smile on her face. At the same moment, Mackinac wondered how to answer Hayden's greetings. The red-haired pirate beside Hayden and Luffy sitting aside, they became quiet. The same goes for all the members of the red-haired pirate group in the tavern. Advertisement. They looked at the situation at the bar where the atmosphere was obviously different from theirs, and then at the situation where their boss suddenly became quiet. They couldn't help swallowing the saliva from their throats. Immediately afterwards, Markino, who looked at Hayden's face, immediately showed the face of the man who shocked the world in her mind, and after the man was taken by the village chief, she seemed to have lost the news. "You are the—" Markino couldn't help exclaiming, but she didn't dare to be too sure of her judgment. Hayden looked at Mackinac's reaction and smiled. He nodded and then sat down. "Miss Mackinac, I haven't repaid you for your kindness," he said with a smile. Listening to the person in front of her confirming her guess, Magino couldn't help but smile. "Great, I thought you were—" Boom! Markino was interrupted by this sound before she could finish her words. "Miss Mackinac, who is this who won't introduce us?" The red-haired pirate named Shanks, with a tone that is unusual for him, inserted between Hayden and Mackinac. At this time, focusing all his attention on Mackinac, or in other words, Hayden, who was focusing on the seafood risotto he was about to order, he couldn't help turning his head to look at the person who was talking next to him. Straw hat, red hair, 3 scars on the eyes, red hair. Hayden was taken aback in his heart, but then he thought of this guy with red hair. It seemed nothing strange to appear here. "Yo, Luffy, long time no see." Hayden smiled and greeted Luffy, who was sitting on Shanks' right. "Huh?" Luffy was struggling with a steak, with big doubts on his face. "Bearded man. Who are you?" He spoke out the question in his heart without hesitation. Hayden's smile suddenly stiffened. Chapter 232, King of Thieves. Previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement. "You kid. Oh." Hayden muttered to himself, just about to say something.
But he knew that Luffy's urinary sex also knew that what he said was just to find uncomfortable food for himself.
"You saved me from the beach last time, do you remember?" Hayden tried to give Luffy some hints. Anyway, this kid didn't quite understand his situation or something. "Do not remember." Luffy, whose cheeks were stuffed with meat, shook his head and replied. Hayden was taken aback by the answer, and he then thought that Luffy had been looking at his Zhanpakudao at the time. "Didn't you like my knife last time?" he said. The Zhanpakudao Luffy on his waist gave Luffy a look. "Ah, I remember, you are the seaweed man." Luffy, whose memory was triggered by the katana, immediately yelled. And Shanks, who was between Luffy and Hayden, looked dumbfounded. After staring at Hayden's face for a while, he finally remembered why this guy's appearance would give him a kind of familiarity. This guy is the fallen navy that killed 2 Dragonites on the Chambord Islands a year ago, and later escaped under the siege of the general, is now a billion-berry bounty criminal called the Dragon Killer by the world. Suddenly, the look in Shanks' eyes became oppressive. The temperament of the whole person immediately felt like a man who stayed in a bar every day to a man who would not have a trace of fear even if he was about to face tens of thousands of attacks. The crew of Shanks's crew then noticed the captain's change at the moment. Everyone stopped their affairs without saying a word, and changed accordingly. Whether this person is an enemy or a friend is unclear. With Mackinac and Luffy on the sidelines, Shanks had to be prepared. Advertisement. Relax, Shanks. At the same time, Hayden, who sensed the change, motioned to Shanks to relax. Then he asked Miss Marchino behind the bar, "Miss Marchino, can you give me another seafood risotto from last time? I have money to pay this time." Magino looked at the atmosphere in front of him, nodded subconsciously, and went to the back kitchen without saying a word, letting their men deal with matters. However, she has nothing to worry about. She understands Shanks. The name seems to be the man named Hayden. Since the village chief helped him at that time, there should be nothing to worry about. "I just came here to eat. By the way, I will see if I have a chance to pay it back," Hayden said casually with a shrug. Similarly, he didn't worry about Shanks' problem, as long as he was not afraid of involving Mackinaw and Luffy, then he would never tell the world government of his location. Of course, Hayden also wouldn't let his affairs involve this town. Finished. Hayden looked at the cabinet behind the bar, what was on display, and whether there was any soda like Coke he liked. Beer and rum are not what he likes to drink. "Is it?" Shanks murmured. "I thought of what this guy said to Luffy just now, ha 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 ha." He burst into laughter without warning. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, flap. His big hand made a noise on Luffy's head. "You kid, you actually saved someone." The smile that Shanks bloomed at this moment infected the whole house. The crew of his crew looked at the captain's smile, and all laughed, returning to their previous state, as if there was a short silence before, and there was no existence at all. Hayden turned his head to look at Shanks laughing. Although this guy's personality seems to be like this on weekdays, he is still a little uncomfortable to feel the pleasant atmosphere now. Hayden shook his head, not paying attention to Shanks next to him. And Shanks, who was slapped away by Luffy with his hand, stopped laughing. Advertisement: "Hey, you guy was saved by Luffy, this kid, that's really lucky for you." As he said, Shanks suddenly hung his left hand on Shanghai Deng's shoulder, and patted Hayden twice. "I said, you guys are too familiar." Hayden suppressed the man's hand and patted him on top of him, and put Shanks in his arm and threw it down. "Well, what does it matter?" Shanks continued talking to Hayden indifferently. Then, the time in the tavern continued to flow. Hayden ate the seafood risotto he wanted to eat. Shanks was also a little excited because the man who shocked the world unexpectedly appeared here a year ago. Luffy continued to be sullen about Shanks not taking him out to sea. After a while, boom! A door-kicking sound suddenly sounded in the cheerful atmosphere of the tavern. "Excuse me." The tone contained a weird hello and then sounded. "He. It turns out that this is a pirate." The guy who walked in muttered to himself, "This is the first time I have seen it, it's so stupid." Except for Hayden, who was addicted to the seafood risotto, everyone in the pub turned their attention to this visitor. And this one who kicked in. Wearing a small braid, a fork-shaped scar on his forehead, wearing a windbreaker, and a western sword pinned to his waist. At the same time, there were several people behind him, like his men, coming in together behind him. "We are bandits. Today we are not here to rob, and sell us a 10-barrel bar." The bandit leader, Hikuma, standing by the bar, asked while looking at Makino. Advertisement: "I rely on?" Another legendary character? Hayden, who was addicted to the seafood risotto, was shocked, and the legendary characters were sent to him one by one. The conversation of the King of Thieves, just as Haideng's mind recalled at the moment, sentence after sentence was being staged wonderfully, but he didn't want to stop it. The next scene between Shanks and the Mountain Thief King is a deeper scene in his memory. At the same time, he also wanted to see with his own eyes whether a character like Shanks was really smashed into a bottle, and he was not prepared to do anything. Then just listen. Snapped. The Thief King smashed the bottle on Shanks' head. In an instant, the atmosphere in the tavern changed, and an unknown breath filled the air. There was a look of horror on Mackinaw's face. The subordinates of the King of Thieves showed an evil smile. Shanks's men didn't respond. Lu Fei, who was still holding a fruit to eat, was startled. "My head is worth 8 million Baileys. I am the most wanted criminal. I have killed 56 self-righteous guys like you." Rishong faintly held up his wanted warrant, and said to Shanks. However, Hayden was very surprised, but the scene he had seen before appeared immediately before his eyes. Shanks, who was hit by a wine bottle, seemed to care nothing. He got up from the chair and squatted down with his wet head, then picked up the shards of the wine bottle, and said in his mouth, "I'm so sorry, Miss Mackinaw. Do you have a rag?" The stunned Miss Messino returned to her senses immediately, and hurriedly answered Shanks. "Oh, no, I'll do all these things." Her tone was full of worry and anxiety about the tense situation at this moment. Chapter 233 Puff, Puff. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement and the bandit king Rishong, who saw this scene. Looking at the pirate who hadn't reacted after he smashed a bottle of wine, he even prepared to clean up the debris on the ground. The interest in Sun Shang's heart was immediately ruined by Shanks' actions. Hiss. The mountain thief king looked at Shanks, who was squatting in front of him, and slowly pulled out his western sword from the scabbard. With no expression on his face, he wanted to directly slash the pirates in front of him, turning 56 into 57. At this moment the tension in the tavern has risen to the extreme, even in the eyes of people who cannot understand the atmosphere. The tension at this moment is already very obvious. However, snapped. A crisp voice suddenly sounded in this silent environment. This sound is the sound of tableware colliding, and this sound is the sound of Hayden just finished eating. "Miss Mackinaw, this seafood risotto is really delicious." Hayden shook his head and stood up as if there was no one beside him. With everyone's eyes focused at this moment, he lowered the straw hat on his head as much as possible to cover his face. Then, Hayden lowered his head to face the bandit, who was stupefied in a knife-drawing position. Shanks, who was made like this by the bandits, would not react. Hayden admired him. However, if he were to be treated like this, the bandit might not survive a second. And, besides Miss Mackinaw's worry and anxiety, he saw in his eyes, there was no need to make friends feel uneasy. Under the unexpected expression of the bandit, under Miss Mackinaw's puzzled expression, advertisement, almost everyone in the tavern looked suspicious. Boom! A sound like thunder exploding at close range beside them suddenly rang in their hearts. It seemed that a very powerful aura suddenly appeared beside them, which caused the instinctive vigilance in their hearts to arouse a reflexive response. Immediately after that, a second had not passed since Hayden stood in front of the bandit. Puff! 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 The sound of falling to the ground sounded one after another, smashing the wooden floor in the tavern for a while. I saw it shockingly. The bandits near the bar, including their leader, Sun Bear, seemed to lose their souls in an instant. It was clear that nothing happened, but they were all hit by something. Now, several bandits standing at the entrance of the tavern, they watched the boss suddenly fainted to the ground, and immediately regained consciousness after a second. However, at this moment, they did not want to continue to trouble the store, as if their boss fell to the ground, the idea of finding trouble in their hearts also fell. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. You guys wait. After our boss wakes up, just wait and see. Today we will kill you first. The remaining bandits gave out cruel words in a panic. A few of them can just drag their accomplices with one hand and go out of the pub. As for why, the other bandits all fell, but they didn't. Of course, it was the result of Hayden's precise control of Ryotsu. The bandits dragged their accomplices out of the tavern. They came fiercely and walked dingy. At this time, advertisement, the tension in the tavern was also taken away by them as they left. Baffling. Shanks, squatting on the ground, murmured, but the look he hid under the straw hat did not seem to be confused. Miss Mackinaw hurriedly walked out from behind the bar, went to squat down in front of Shanks, and asked if his situation was serious. After Hayden finished his thoughtful seafood risotto, he was ready to leave first. The fewer people knew about him, the better. As for why he just used spirit pressure to deter the bandit just now, that's because he didn't plan to let Miss Mackinaw and Luffy see the bloody scene in advance. He is a swordsman, and the swordsman solves the enemy, usually in restricted level situations. Hayden put more than 2 servings of Bailey of seafood risotto on the bar, and then left the tavern without saying hello. Then, just as he had just walked out of the tavern, there was a burst of laughter behind him, and the questioning sound of Luffy over the laughter that seemed to overturn the roof. Hayden chuckled lightly, shook his head, and continued walking without looking back. Although only this short period of time has passed, he truly felt the charm of this group of living characters. After that, some time passed. Had the experience of coming to Windmill Murakami alone for the first time. Hayden has come here from time to time during this period of time, and he has read the latest newspaper several times, and there has been no news about him in the newspaper for a long time. Of course, the reward still exists. In order to repay his kindness, Hayden told Marquino of his temporary training location and told him that if something unexpected happened, he could be found immediately. As a result, time continued to pass. Another period of time passed. Luffy, who had been staying in Windmill Village during this period, had nothing to play with after Shanks and the others went out to sea, so he had to go to Mackinac to play. Advertisement inside the tavern. Luffy was sitting weakly on the high chair in front of the bar, holding a glass of juice from Mackinac in his hand. Captain and they have been out at sea for many days, he said to Marquino. Behind the bar, Marquino heard Luffy's words and smiled. I feel lonely, right? Luffy. She wiped the glass while chatting with Luffy. No, I haven't forgiven the bandits before. Luffy thought about it, felt unhappy in his heart, and drank all the juice in one sip. I really misunderstood them. There is also the Seagrass Man, who obviously also carried a knife, but didn't do anything. I saved him because of the loss. Lu Fei Yu thought that the more it was unpleasant, he couldn't help but lay on the counter table, biting the edge of the glass with his mouth. Really? I think they can calm down and face after being bullied, which is more powerful. At this point, Marquino couldn't help laughing and continuing. As for your Seagrass Man, I am not. I think he has done nothing. When Luffy heard this, he couldn't help but shook his head. Machino, you don't understand. Sometimes a man must stand up bravely. And that Seagrass Man, I saved him because of me, huh? The expression of his slung face passed through the glass to Marquino. Really, I really don't understand. Makino smiled and did not refute Luffy. Then when Luffy was chatting listlessly with Mackinac, suddenly, excuse me. A voice came from the door of the tavern. Luffy, who thought it was Shanks and the others, couldn't help but curl up. Turned to look in the direction of the door, but after a second, the expression on his face suddenly stiffened. Ah. A drop of sweat appeared on his forehead. And those who came by accident were the bandits who had appeared before. Moreover, a large group of people came into the tavern today. Obviously, it's like the last time they didn't succeed, they didn't come with good intentions. Chapter 234 The Fifth Emperor was arrested. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. A few minutes passed. The village chief. It's not good. Mackinac panicked and yelled to the village chief in the house at the moment. The door of the room that she opened vigorously slammed into the wall and made a loud noise, and the village chief immediately looked out the door. What's the matter, Marquino? So panicked. Mackinac was very anxious at this time. Luffy. He was caught by the bandits, she told the village chief out of breath. What? The village chief stood up immediately in shock. The first thought in his head now was to find someone, but now who should I call for this situation? Shanks' group of pirates has not yet returned from the sea. It's impossible for the guy Carp to appear suddenly. Correct. A figure flashed across the village chief's mind. Mackinac, go and call Hayden over. The village chief pointed to Mackinac, and hurried to the place where the bandit caught Luffy. Because Hayden is still some distance away from here, although he doesn't know what the bandits are doing to catch Luffy, but he has to delay the time first. At the same time, on the street outside Mackinac's tavern, the bandits who caught Luffy began to play with Luffy, who had eaten the rubber fruit. After grabbing Luffy's body stretched, he flicked it back and forth, saying that from time to time he was amazed. At the same time, they couldn't help laughing because of the funny effect. Advertisement. Boom. The bandit leader grabbed Luffy's cheeks and threw Luffy out, and Luffy's body bounced on the ground a few times before stopping the rolling trend. Damn it. I can never get around you. Luffy couldn't help rubbing his rubbed forehead, staring bitterly at the bandit leader. The bandit leader didn't care about the look in Luffy's hostile eyes, or what he could do. If you sell him to the circus, you should be able to make a fortune. He rubbed his chin, wondering how many Baileys this kid who ate the devil fruit could sell. Luffy has not forgotten the last time the bandits bullied Shanks, let alone the way this guy treats him now. Wow wow. Luffy picked up a big wooden stick and swiped it towards the body of the bandit leader, Hishong. The bandit leader stood motionless. Too annoying. He raised his leg casually, and when Luffy didn't react, he stepped Luffy's head under his feet with one foot. Take your feet away. Asshole bandit. Luffy struggling violently on the ground with his head unable to move, shouting. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi at this time. The village chief of Windmill Village rushed to the outside of the tavern and arrived here. Let go of that kid. I beg you. He yelled at the bandits who were all spiteful, not afraid of the sharp knives in their hands. Suddenly, the village chief knelt down towards them. In the sight of Luffy, whose head was stepped on the ground, he could just see the village chief, lowering his head as much as possible. I don't know what Daofei guy has done, and he doesn't intend to argue with you. If we don't dislike it, we are willing to pay the ransom. Please let the kid go. Luffy, who was stepped on the ground, didn't struggle anymore. Advertisement. The bandit leader looked at the village chief who understood this. His face couldn't help but raised a smile, as expected to be an elderly person who knows the rules of this world. He suddenly paused when he said this. The bandit's face changed to a cold expression, and he continued, But I can't help it, I won't let him go, because he really irritated me. At this moment, the bandit leader, Sun Bear, wanted to kill Luffy directly. Shanks led his crew, and suddenly appeared behind the village head when everyone on the street didn't realize it. I can't see a half-person figure when I return to the port. I thought something happened. Shanks slowly revealed his eyes hidden under the straw hat. It turned out to be the bandits before. There was a standard smile on his face, making it impossible to tell whether the meaning of the smile was true or false. Luffy, isn't your fist as powerful as a pistol? Don't talk coldly. Luffy hammered the ground with a fist and yelled at Shanks. After that, just as there is not much difference in the development of the plot, Shanks and the others quickly cleaned up this group of bandits, and almost all of them were cleaned up by the red-haired deputy captain, Ben Beckman. But at the same time, because there are still not 10 million bandits to deal with this group of bounties, they naturally don't need to be serious. And it is precisely because of this reason. The red-haired pirate group, which was about to become the fourth emperor in the future, was actually bewildered by a smoke bomb of 8 million bandits. Where's Luffy? Shanks looked at the smoke wall that suddenly rose up in front of him, looked around anxiously, and yelled at the crew beside him. At the same time, Mackinaw finally ran to Hayden's temporary training site, which was located by a river on the outskirts of Kolbo Mountain. This is the time for lunch in the morning. Hayden was sitting cross-legged on the head of a large crocodile, fishing in the middle of the river, preparing for the next lunch. Hayden. Luffy was taken away by those bandits. Advertisement. Marquino, who was standing on the bank of the river, shouted towards Hayden in the middle of the river, her voice very anxious. What? Hayden turned his head abruptly, and saw that Mackinaw was standing on the shore in a panic and shouting at him. Then he realized what Mackinaw had just yelled at him. Huh! After a slight sound, the figure of Hayden in Mackinaw's eyes suddenly disappeared from the crocodile's head, leaving only a fishing rod still in the air. You go back to Murakami first. Hayden's voice rang above Mackinaw's head. After he left this sentence, he ignored Mackinaw, and Shunbu began to rush to the direction of Windmill Village. Before Mackinaw had time to react, Hayden's figure flashed in her eyes, and then immediately disappeared. Mackinaw's eyes widened, but at this moment, she felt the strength of the man who shocked the world a year ago, and could even be said to have changed the world. At the same time, she probably understood that if she had this ability, then Luffy shouldn't have any problems now. Whoosh! 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 Hayden's figure flickered in the air, and before he was completely visible, he immediately disappeared and changed to the next position, so that he seemed to have become a transparent person at this moment. On the way of instant walking, Hayden used the sights, hearings and colors he had cultivated over the past year, carefully feeling the situation ahead, trying to find Luffy's breath that was easily overlooked, and Shanks's undetectable breath, and the bandit humble breath. Not for a while. Hayden just passed over the Windmill Village. He felt as if he had just experienced a turmoil below. He immediately accelerated the speed of the instant step and went straight to the sea outside the Windmill Village in front of him. Chapter 235 Unfold the World Curtain. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Offshore outside the port of Windmill Village. The blue sky showed no sign of turning into bad weather. A few white clouds drifted past, which further brought out its gentleness and tranquility. Today is a suitable day to go to sea, but for Luffy, he does not want to go to sea in this situation. Ha 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 ha. finally escaped. They never thought that the bandits would escape to the sea. The bandit leader was standing on a small boat, laughing at Luffy who had been caught in front of him. Looking at Luffy who was lying on the side of the boat looking out to the sea, the bandit Hikuma continued. Well, I will drag you here as a hostage. But now it's nothing to do with you. The 56 people who provoked me before are all killed by me. Immediately afterwards, before Luffy understood what he meant, the bandit Hikuma relentlessly kicked Luffy into the sea. The strength on his legs also used his full strength, kicking Luffy into the sea far from the boat. Bye now. The bandit Hikuma murmured as he watched Luffy fall into the sea. At this moment, for Luffy who was kicked out, it seemed to have slowed down countless times. The shaky figure of the bastard bandit on the boat triggered a memory in Luffy's heart. Damn it. Damn it. I didn't even get a punch. Unwilling words flowed from his teeth, and the scene of these bastards mocking Shanks appeared before his eyes. The ridicule in the memory came from the mouth of the hateful bandit in his sight at the same moment. He stood on the boat and laughed loudly, like a successful bad guy. Puff. Luffy's body smashed into the sea. The sea water immediately enveloped his whole body, from the ears, from the eyes, from the nostrils, without letting go of any place, ready to snatch his whole body directly. Luffy wanted to struggle instinctively, and wanted to float on the surface. Suddenly, advertisement when he first started struggling. He looked into the sight of the bastard bandit, but noticed that a terrifying monster appeared behind the bandit. The monster's open mouth of blood was more than enough to swallow the ship with people. Luffy was shocked by the monster. Immediately afterwards, in his line of sight, even though the bastard bandit noticed the monster behind him, he was swallowed by the monster in an instant. Wow! Ah! The bandit only left a desperate scream, and this scream also awakened the terrified Luffy suddenly. Wow! Come! Somebody help! At this moment when Luffy screamed, the two silhouettes dashed across the sea like lightning, causing waves to skyrocket. You save Luffy, I'll take care of this guy. Hayden, who was racing across the sea at high speed, motioned to Shanks beside him. Shanks nodded immediately to express his understanding. Huh! Shanks' figure rushed to the side of Luffy in the blink of an eye, and put his arm around Luffy to prevent him from sinking into the sea after eating the devil fruit. At the same time, the king of the sea, who was rushing towards Luffy, didn't care if there was one more food in his sight, and continued to rush towards Luffy and Shanks. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, and Hayden at this time. His figure just appeared on the attack route of the king of the sea, standing out of thin air at a height of about 1 meter from the sea. Immediately afterwards, in the eyes of Shanks and Luffy, Hayden unhurriedly drew a knife in front of him. Then it was as if he was cutting the air in front of him. The blade did not touch the monster at all, and then he started to close the knife without worrying about the monster close at hand in front of him. Click. The blade in Hayden's hand touched the scabbard and made a slight noise. In an instant, advertisement this slight sound seemed to contain infinite power. Before Luffy could see clearly, the monster that rushed towards them fiercely, there was something terrifying on the spot, and its head was directly beheaded. Ah! 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 Luffy's eyes widened in surprise, like a copper bell, making a random noise in his mouth. Boom! The huge head of the king of the sea smashed into the sea at this time, causing a wave of waves to skyrocket. The sea water immediately slapped Luffy and Shanks like rain. As for Hayden, knowing the situation very well, he has long avoided the area affected by the waves. Shanks. Luffy still had a trace of fear on his face, looking at Shanks who was hugging him, not knowing what to say. Luffy, I should thank you. The village chief told me everything. You did it for us. Shanks' words immediately moved Luffy's heartstrings. Ooh. Tears swirled in Luffy's eyes. Hey, how can a man cry? Shanks stared at Luffy in his arms in a coaxing tone. Woo. Luffy forcibly resisted his urge to cry. He remained silent, and did not speak anymore. Shanks watched Luffy silently, and he didn't continue. He glanced at Hayden who was parked in the air next to him, and then swam back with Luffy. Shanks. Luffy suddenly shouted. Shanks listened to Luffy calling him. What? He asked with a smile. That. The seaweed man who saved us just now, so handsome. Luffy's eyes instantly turned into two twinkling stars. Nani? This day, Luffy finally understood why Shanks refused to take him out to sea. Advertisement: the danger of the sea, my own insignificance. If it weren't for Shanks, if the Seaweed Man saved him. After that, Shanks' arm did not entrust success, and Luffy's route also seemed to be wrong. Ever since he saw Hayden cut the Queen of the Sea with a knife, he had been pestering Hayden and wanted to learn swordsmanship. Of course, after Hayden experimented for a few days, he still decided to break Luffy's way of kendo. A few days after this incident, Shanks decided that it was time to leave the East China Sea, ready to return to the voyage. The small port of Kinderdeek. Because of the days when the red-haired pirates went to sea, most of the villagers from Fengche village gathered at the port to say goodbye. You are leaving now? Luffy asked Shanks with a smile on his face. Ah. Shanks walked down a few steps. Although I've stayed here for too long, it's always going to be parting. You will be lonely. No, Luffy didn't even think about answering. The Seaweed Man is still here. I won't ask you to take me away again. Because I decided to be a pirate. After speaking, his face appeared fooling expression. Ah. Shanks, who heard the word seaweed, immediately turned and looked at Luffy. Don't go too close to that guy. His tone was still as weird as ever. But, are you a pirate yourself? Can you be a pirate? Of course. Luffy's face raised an expression of dissatisfaction. One day I will find a partner who will not lose to your group, and find the world's #1 treasure. I absolutely want to be the king of Shanghai thieves. At the same moment, Hayden leaned in a corner where no one had noticed, and looked at the scene that was slowly opened on the big screen of the world stage in his line of sight. Shanks was silent for a moment, and passed the one-piece straw hat on his head to Luffy. Hayden could feel the inexplicable feeling surrounding him, as if at this moment, the whole world was slowly approaching him. The familiar world was unfolding in front of him little by little. Haiyuan Calendar 1512. The one-piece straw hat that Shanks brought was handed over to Luffy by him. Chapter 236 Lieutenant General Carp, previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement about 3 to 4 weeks after the red-haired pirates left. Windmill Village, where few outsiders come, has completely returned to a peaceful life. Although there are still laughter, there is no such laughter, like a vast ocean. The little fishing village lost that laughter, but time continued to flow away, non-stop. Hayden did not need to continue hiding in the deep mountains and old forests at this time. After several times of entering Fengche village, the simple villagers of Fengche village have regarded him as a normal wandering swordsman. Exactly the reason for the bandit last time. Now there was a swordsman in the village who could call for help, and they quickly accepted Hayden. Of course, Hayden still lives on the outskirts of Kolbo Mountain, not in the Windmill Village anyway. Although he has not tasted the iron fist of Lieutenant General Carp, he has also tasted the iron fist of Teacher Zephyr, who is the same generation of Lieutenant General Carp. He believes that even if the power is different, it is almost the same. But at the same time, Hayden himself knew that if he stayed here again, he would definitely run into Lieutenant General Carp. It was just a matter of time. As for why Hayden still stayed here, he didn't choose to change to another island to practice and hide. That's because of this reason, or Lieutenant General Carp. If Hayden is not sure about the reaction of Lieutenant General Carp to him, I don't know if he is regarded as an enemy in Lieutenant General Carp's eyes. The legend of the Navy. He has not only heard, but when he came to this world, he has also seen it. By then, relying on his own speed and the ability to step in the air, he is confident that he should be able to slip away, but if he goes out then, the companions he finds are probably miserable. He has thought about everything so far. Hayden has revolved around himself, and has never wanted to find a companion in the same industry. But now, a reward of billions has always been on him. Not only will the Navy and the world government keep chasing him, the pirates will naturally chase him. Advertisement: if Hayden wanted the reward order to be completely cleared, he would only have to kill the world government and Lord Yim on the head of the 5 old stars. And to do this, Hayden hadn't been naive yet, thinking that he could do it all by himself. When he goes to sea in the future, he must first find a few like-minded partners, and then find the best shipbuilding materials in the world to build an impressive ship. As Hayden thought about the future in his heart, he walked slowly towards the tavern in Windmill Murakami. Coming to the next restaurant every few days has become a necessary procedure for Hayden every week. Good morning, Small. As soon as he walked into the village, the owner of the Murakami fish shop greeted Hayden. This is why Hayden hunts and sells sea kings cheaply to him on weekdays. Good morning. Hayden smiled back to the owner of the fish shop and continued to move in the direction of the tavern. Along the way, Hayden was like a character like the top 10 good people in this small village. He greeted the villagers in the village and walked to the tavern. The small village arrived at the destination in no time. Standing in the doorway outside the tavern. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden immediately noticed that in the tavern, at this point in time, there was an unusually noisy sound. But this can't stop his daily process. Marquino, give me an old set meal. Hayden had already spoken before he completely opened the shuttered door to enter. Crunch. The moving shutter was pushed open by him. The sound of pushing the door and the sound of people talking immediately caused everyone in the tavern to focus their eyes on Hayden at the door. And all these people are referring to Luffy wearing a straw hat, Marquino, the owner of the tavern, Wup, the mayor of Windmill Village, and Lieutenant General Carp, who is burly in a black suit, and his grandfather. Advertisement now. Luffy was jumping up and down in the tavern, just not wanting to be caught by his grandpa. Hayden moved stiffly at the door, not knowing whether to continue walking in, or to treat it as nothing, then push the door to leave the tavern. Seagrass. Seeing Hayden's appearance, Luffy immediately seemed to have seen a rescuer. Seagrass man, stop my grandfather quickly, he yelled. His footsteps swiftly moved towards Hayden at the door. What? 3 exclamations sounded at the same time, overlapping each other. Not only Hayden, who was sluggish at the door, but also the village head and Mackinaw standing at the bar. When the village chief and Mackinaw saw Hayden's arrival, both of them were dumbfounded. They didn't tell Carp a word about Hayden's existence. They themselves reminded Hayden many times to be careful of Carp's appearance when he came to Murakami. This situation finally came. The village chief watched Hayden and Carp officially meet. Although he learned from Hayden that he had known Carp in the Navy before, he also got confirmation from Carp. However, in this embarrassing situation, he didn't know what the two men would come up with. Luffy. Standing at the door, Hayden yelled and held Luffy, who was rushing over, in his hands to prevent this guy from suddenly climbing on top of him. And just in this short period of time when Luffy fled to Hayden. Carp, who was also at the bar, looked at the figure that unexpectedly appeared at the door, and felt the breath emanating from this person. Advertisement. Although he was always confused, he could still recognize Hayden's identity at the moment. Hayden. Carp's face sank suddenly. While murmuring Hayden's name, he slowly turned to the direction of the village chief. He believed that the village chief knew Hayden's identity, and looking at his acquaintance with Luffy, and his acquaintance with Mackinaw, obviously this guy had been here for a long time. It's good now. Now Luffy was not only infected by the red-haired bastard, he was clamoring to be a pirate, and now he also knows the kid Hayden. Everything is accumulated in a silent atmosphere. Carp's face grew darker, and the temperature in the tavern seemed to drop. Lieutenant General Carp. I have no plans to fight you. Hayden walked towards the bar counter while holding Luffy moving in one hand. He doesn't think Lieutenant Carp will fight him in this situation. You kid, you would choose a place to hide, Carp said flatly to Hayden, who approached. The tone of voice could not make Hayden distinguish his emotions at the moment, but Hayden could probably guess it after thinking about it. It was purely an accident, Hayden replied with a shrug. Luffy saved my life then. Luffy. When Carp heard this, he just made a deep voice and prepared to give Luffy a look. But it immediately occurred to him that Luffy didn't know who this guy was at the time. He just saved a person, so he had to give up. And Luffy, who was put on the bar by Hayden. He felt the atmosphere between the seaweed man and his grandfather at this time, but he was confused, and there were as many question marks as the stars in the sky. Chapter 237 Ambition. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. You kid, you should know what happens when you show up in front of me. Carp sits slowly on the high chair in front of the bar. His tall and sturdy body looks like the chair proportions are made for dwarves. Hayden followed and sat on the high chair, slightly raised his head to look directly at Lieutenant General Carp, who was right in front of him, feeling the oppression that felt like a huge wave on him. I know. He replied with a shrug. But I believe I should be fine. Ha 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 ha. Carp burst out laughing, as if Hayden had just said a funny joke. But after a second, suddenly, his words changed. Little devil. Are you sure you are okay now? Carp's tones suddenly dropped a few tones, as low as possible. Boom. Carp clenched his fist and knocked it on the countertop, and then stood up. Simultaneously, Hayden also continued to stand up following Carp's movements. His right hand was already covering the hilt of the white snow sleeve on his waist. Although he knew he might still be no match for Carp, Carp couldn't beat him directly. Boom. An invisible shock erupted from Hayden's body. The Reiki aura that Hayden concentrated controlled all attacked Carp who was in front of him at this moment. Behind Hayden, the village chief, Marquino, and Luffy were 3 people. Although they felt the atmosphere in the tavern, it seemed to have changed in an instant, but they did not understand the specific reason, nor did they feel the positive pressure sense. Advertisement in Carp's body at this moment, the state shown, it seems that he has not been oppressed, but in fact, he is at the center of this huge sense of oppression. Hayden was not surprised either. It was only in order to express his enlightenment that he exploded the spiritual pressure. Immediately afterwards, the situation remained like this, after a stalemate. When Carp stood up, he did nothing, and then sat back in his chair. Just like the tense situation just now, it hasn't happened at all. Seeing that Lieutenant General Carp was not going to make a direct move, Hayden also pulled out a little sleeve, and Shirayuki slowly closed it. With a slight click, Hayden also sat back in the high chair. As a result, the two went back to the original situation and sat face to face. What did you kid think of? Carp stared into Hayden's eyes, trying to judge from his eyes whether his next answer was true. After Hayden heard this question, he thought for a while in his heart, why he killed the celestial dragon in the first place. His brows frowned subconsciously. At first, it seemed that the Tinlongren wanted to kill him, right? The memory of the Chambord Islands is a bit vague, and he can't think of the reason for a while, but it should be that he killed the dragons after seeing the things that the dragons had been doing. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. I saw the group of guys. Hayden answered Lieutenant General Carp's question casually. When Carp heard this answer, he was surprised, but not surprised, really, he muttered in a daze. For some unknown reason, although he also saw the Tinlongren group as displeasing to his eyes, he had no good solution. Hayden nodded and said nothing. Then there was silence between the two. After a while, after seeing the tension of the two disappeared, Mackinaw and the village chief both walked beside them at this time. Advertisement, Hayden, do you still want to eat now? Magino asked. Oh. The silent Hayden nodded immediately after returning to his senses. Thank you, Mackinaw. Being so surprised by Lieutenant General Carp, he almost forgot his intention to come here. When he thought of something delicious to eat in his heart, the silence of Hayden suddenly aroused. Luffy, would you like to drink soda? I will treat you today. A slightly excited Hayden asked Lu Fei, who was stunned. Want? Luffy, who heard the word soda, suddenly woke up from a sluggish state. He was calmed just now because of his grandfather and Seagrass Man, as if they were talking about something very profound. Hey. Hayden smiled, go get it yourself, and get me a bottle by the way. It is good. After Luffy agreed, he flipped over the bar and took down 2 bottles of soda from one place. And Carp watching from the side. He looked at the familiar faces of Hayden and Luffy, the blue veins on his forehead protruding more and more, and his nostrils began to expand uncontrollably. After that, it didn't take a while. Hayden ate clean seafood risotto in a few bites, and Luffy also drank his soda. At this moment, Carp watched Hayden plan to leave here directly, as if he didn't take him seriously. What are you going to do next? He asked Hayden, who stood up. Calculating the age of this kid, Hayden, he should be only about 18 or 19 now. And according to what the Warring States period told him, the intelligence about the monster in this little devil's body, and the strength of this little devil himself. It has been more than a year now. How much this kid's strength has increased, he doesn't know the specifics. Carp didn't believe that Hayden, a young and energetic kid, would just avoid the world government for the rest of his life after living in a small fishing village. Hayden stood up and heard this question. After thinking about it for a while, he smiled on his face and gave the answer. In order to prevent myself from being wanted for the rest of my life, I plan to turn the world upside down. Advertisement finished. The village chief, Marquino, and Carp, who heard this, were all taken aback by the words, and for the first time they couldn't understand the true meaning of Hayden's words. Hayden didn't intend to explain the meaning of the words, and was ready to walk outside the tavern, but at this moment, Carp, who was stunned, came back to his senses in the blink of an eye, as if he immediately understood the true meaning of Hayden's words after stunned. Clang! Carp's iron fist slammed on Hayden's head, and immediately knocked out a big bag on top of his head. But Hayden didn't fight back. He instantly felt that this attack didn't really mean to attack him, but what did Lieutenant General Carp mean? Just when Hayden was puzzled, he suddenly felt, why did he seem to be in the air? Then he waited for Hayden to look to his left. I saw that Lieutenant General Carp lifted him up, and he also carried the individual on his left hand. That person was Luffy, who was struggling indiscriminately. Hey, Hayden yelled. He couldn't figure out what Carp meant. Luffy on Carp's left hand also yelled and yelled together. Carp, who holds two little ghosts in one hand, doesn't care about the shouts of the two little ghosts. You two will follow me honestly. After Carp greeted the village chief and Marquino, he took Hayden and Luffy out of the tavern together. After that, Carp carrying two people, his footsteps began to walk step by step in the direction of Corbo Mountain. Chapter 238 Masquerade. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement in order for Hayden, the billion-dollar bounty criminal, not to be involved in Windmill Village. Carp took him and Luffy to a place in Corbo Mountain, the bandits of Corbo Mountain, and the Dayton family. As for why Hayden honestly did not resist, in addition to the one reason why Carp's attitude towards him is, there is another reason Hayden needs Carp to help him. Since being rescued by Luffy in Windmill Village a year ago, Hayden has noticed that all the points in his system have been emptied, and the virtual category is now in the unlocked state. Although the imaginary ability was unlocked after the demon imaginary in the body ran out, if he didn't evaporate, the imaginary ability would also be absent. And what will happen after the blur is now, Hayden doesn't know. He hasn't actively tried it once since he woke up. Because he has always been about to move the feeling of the devil in his body, and this feeling is not a good one. He thought that if he didn't suppress this imaginary power in this way, and let him out like this, his body would definitely be taken over by the monster of the demon imaginary, and he would fall into the situation at the time of the Chambord Islands. There are no two generals and 3 monsters in Windmill Village, so he can be suppressed directly. Hayden is very clear about the results of trying to blur, and he has never wanted to take the initiative to try it once. But in the same way, he couldn't always do this, suppressing the devil's impulse in his heart, while continuing to pretend that nothing was going on. Not only for this, but also the ability to blur his strength is also a great improvement. If you want to find a state that can be suppressed in this world, he is not in the state when his sanity is emptied. The naval hero Lieutenant General Carp is a good candidate. Since the demon ran out once, his body seemed to leave him a crack in the door. If he didn't consciously suppress him, then very bad things would happen. With the help of Lieutenant General Carp, he must acquire the active mask form like a gurgling. However, how can I ask Lieutenant General Cap to see himself in the virtual state and not hammer himself to death with a punch? Hayden looked at the back of Carp in front of him, thinking to himself. Advertisement soon. It didn't take a while to walk on the Corbo Mountain Road. The 3 of them came to the place where Dayton's family lived. Lu Fei was thrown directly to the Dayton family by Cap. Carp turned to look at Hayden at this time. Just when he wanted to speak, Hayden spoke first. Lieutenant General Carp, I have a favor and need your help. Hayden asked bluntly, after more than an hour. Far away from Corbo Mountain, there is no unmanned area where there are no human signs. On a barren land, Hayden and Carp stood here facing each other. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. All. You used the next thing to escape from the warring states and the others? Carp asked Hayden with a very interesting expression on his face. Based on his own judgment on the strength of the little ghost, even if Hayden looked at his current age, his strength was very good. However, it is absolutely impossible to escape under the siege of those guys in the warring states period. If what this kid is saying is true, then the increase in his strength brought by the things in his body can hardly be described by doubling. Hayden nodded and said, taking off the hat he was wearing and throwing it aside, almost. Please pay attention to your safety next. I haven't used this thing since the Chambord Islands until now. Ha ha ha. When Carp heard Hayden's words, he burst into laughter. He hadn't heard a kid calling him to pay attention to safety for a long time. You better wait for what you said, otherwise I'm afraid. Carp's words stopped here, but Hayden also knew what he hadn't finished. Advertisement, understand. Hayden nodded heavily. Then, in Carp's sight, without warning, the kid directly pierced his heart with his tight palm. Carp couldn't help frowning, but he didn't stop Hayden from this seeming suicidal behavior. Cough. Hayden, who stabbed his left chest, spit out a mouthful of blood. If he could, he didn't want to turn on the blur in this way. But the feeling that the body uploads to him is like if he wants to enable blur, there is only one way. Hayden's abilities in the Grim Reaper are both from the abilities in the Grim Reaper comics, but they are not exactly the same. Next moment, ho 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 ho, a terrifying roar suddenly erupted from Hayden. The sound was as a kind of aura that could be felt. With him as the center of the circle, it spread out in all directions in an instant, rolling up the dust on the ground and flying into the air. Then the pure white liquid rushed out of Hayden's mouth, nostrils, and any cavities in his body quickly. Oh. Carp continued to observe Hayden's changes at the moment without panic. This thing has never been seen before. He muttered to himself. A trace of doubt arose in my heart. In just a few seconds Carp murmured. Roaring, Hayden exploded with appalling spiritual pressure, and at this moment he completed the virtual transformation. Around the ground he was standing on, he could no longer withstand the spiritual pressure erupting from his body at this moment, and a spider web crack appeared. Advertisement Carp also stepped back a little at this time. Of course, he wasn't afraid of Hayden now, but wanted to avoid the breeze blowing from Hayden's body and the pebble that raised his eyes. At this moment, Hayden's face was covered by a white bone mask with a pair of crescent horns, red and black dangerous lines all over the white bone mask, as if the mask made of white bones was not scary. Suddenly, from the eyes of the bone mask, an unknown red light suddenly appeared, and it was looked into by Carp at this time. Oh, it's what this kid said now. Is reason going to disappear? Carp murmured to himself with squinted eyes, and nodded subconsciously. Even if he felt the unknown breath brought to him by Hayden, he still had nothing to be vigilant about. He knew the feeling that this kid gave him now, although it was improved compared to his normal state, but it was far from the state of this kid when he was on the Chambord Islands. Can it be improved? He muttered, staring at Hayden who was about to attack him. Then, the next second. After the masked form, Hayden's figure suddenly disappeared from where he stood at the last moment. From Carputa's perspective, it seemed like Hayden had just used the ability to teleport. However, Carp still had no idea to avoid it, at the same time. At the moment when the virtualized Hayden attacked Carp, in his heart, he also launched a battle with the demon in his heart at the same time. Chapter 239 Untangled Memory Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement Hayden asked Lieutenant General Tokop for help a week later. Under Carp's 1-week violent hammer, he could barely be able to remain in the masked form for a few minutes. After that, Carp left the windmill village. Hayden also set off to leave the windmill village. The things he stayed here to do are almost done, and there is no need to stay here anymore. If you want to become stronger, you can't improve by practicing alone. With the waves of Luffy, Mackinaw and the village chief, Hayden sailed to the sea in a small boat. Of course, he can always go wherever he wants to go. However, this time he went to sea not for any mission, but just for himself. Besides, he felt that a person running around in the air was more embarrassing than he was sitting in a small boat. In other words, it's like a silly person, with no cards at all. Hayden took the sun from the sunrise and slowly sailed to the other side of the sea horizon. No map, no directions. Just take him along the ocean current, wherever he goes, where he landed. The boat under the seat is worthy of its name, 6 meters long, 2 meters wide, and 0.5 meters deep. Just enough for Hayden to sleep alone, plus a place to store fresh water and supplies. Looking at the vast ocean surrounding him, sitting in a small boat that can touch the sea when bent down, Hayden can even feel the insignificance that he has never felt before. Hayden leaned on the boat, staring at the rolling sea in front of him, lost in thought. In the past, he went to sea either to open the way for large warships, or to fly directly in the air, and also, my red silver horse. Advertisement gone. Thinking of this, Hayden immediately came back to his senses in thought. The mount should have fallen to the female emperor. Hayden frowned and thought. However, he didn't plan to go to that place to get it now, or even approach that Amazon Lily Kingdom. As for why? The answer is, every night after waking up in Windmill Village, I remember a figure in my heart. After being pierced by the demon in the spiritual world, he found the memory that was sealed in ice deep in his mind. I don't know what caused it, but the memory that was sealed in ice began to appear in his mind. The memory of when he first came to this world more than 10 years ago was unbelievably clear to Hayden. He remembered how he had traveled into this world, remembered the first person he met after crossing, and remembered what happened on O'Hara Island at that time. Robin. Hayden murmured, staring blankly at his palm, with a complicated expression on his face. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Since remembering Robin's existence, he didn't want to find Robin directly at that moment. However, if he only relies on his current strength to find Robin, it is undoubtedly to bring her death. Just for this one reason, Hayden now has infinite motivation to become stronger. Feeling the cradle of the sea beneath him, Hayden began to think about what level his strength might reach. At the same time, think about how to focus on those aspects next. Words of this aspect of Reaper's ability. Senbon Sakura is still only a starting point. Although the number of blade decompositions has increased a lot, he feels that Senbon Sakura's abilities should not have much effect on the thick-skinned monsters in the world of One Piece. Advertisement from the initial companionship to the present Shu Baishui. Able to start solution. After the battle in the Chambord Islands, he also obtained the real Wan Jia and gained the approval of Shu Baishui. However, he was afraid that after the complete slaying, the spiritual pressure soared so much that he couldn't control it and let the demon Shu take the opportunity to run out. So this year, he has not performed it once, but now that he was barely able to face off, Hayden decided to find an uninhabited island next and test Shu Baishui's complete solution. In addition, the 4 major areas of Zhanshuan Gogi, in the God of Death. One's own swordsmanship and swordsmanship are in the division of swordsman. According to his own understanding, Hayden divided the level of swordsmanship into 4 levels. 1 is a swordsman. Simply put, you can be called a swordsman by picking up a sword and possessing sword skills. 2nd, it is a swordsman who understands the profound meaning of Zhanti. 3rd, he is a swordsman, capable of flying, slashing, and slashing. The lowest level of this level can be considered as long as it can cut out the sword chi from the body. As for the upper limit of Jian Hao, it can be very high, and it is not a big deal to cut the mountain at will. 4th, it is a black knife, possessing a black knife tempered with armed colors. Of course, there is also the final state of the road of Kendo, which can protect what you want to protect and cut everything you want to cut off. Hayden is now working towards the black knife stage. He had already learned armed domineering 6 months ago. The 6 naval formulas that were previously practiced during the naval period were basically a domineering training method. For Hayden now, the acquisition of armed domineering is just letting the flow take its course. And punch this field. Although Hayden thinks that fisting to the flesh is also a kind of man's romance, he is really not very used to fighting with his fists. With Shunbu, ordinary guys can't catch him anyway. Advertisement the last ghostly words. Hayden loved these gadgets very much, but spent a lot of points to redeem them. The breaking road goes up to 90 and down to the first road, except for a few that have not been exchanged. Basically all are gathered. The words to bind the Tao are the first few words, the middle ones, and the last 2 of the highest level. Let's talk about the ability to blur. After masquerading, the speed will first be improved, and naturally, the evasion, attack, and instant step will be improved in all aspects. The same applies to your own Ryotsu. What's more, the body will immediately acquire a part of the super rapid regeneration ability. The disadvantage is that the time will not last long, and after the mask on the face is broken, the physical condition will become very dangerous. Suddenly thought so much. Hayden contrasted his own strength with those on the sea. As long as it is not for the 3 natural monsters, there should be no problem with the Lieutenant General of the Shanghai Navy headquarters. The general's words should be based on his domineering and how long he can support him. In terms of pirates, it should not be a problem to pick up 4 or 5 billion pirates casually. When Hayden thought about it this way, it seemed as if he was already very powerful. However, he did not show a smile on his face now, instead he frowned. If you are only at this level, how can you protect Robin? Hayden muttered to himself, looking at the blue sea ahead. He couldn't help falling into his complex emotions. Haiyuan Calendar 1512. The man named Hayden set sail again from a small place called Fengchekan in the East China Sea. Chapter 242 years later. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement time is after Hayden every time he swings his sword, every time Hayden. Day by day passed. It seemed that it was only yesterday. Soon, time has come to January 1514 in the Haiyuan calendar. It has been 2 years since Hayden departed from Windmill Village in the East China Sea. Counting the time spent in Windmill Village for a year or so, Hayden, the degenerate navy, who killed 2 Denonites, has disappeared in the sea for more than 3 years. Regarding the existence of Hayden, the sea still remembers that it was the navy who killed the 2 Celestials, but they couldn't think of the specific information immediately. In the past 3 years, Hayden has traveled throughout the East China Sea and the South China Sea. Take the windless zone in the first half of the Great Route as a road splinter and cross it at will. But he didn't stay on the Great Route for some time, just passing by. In order to become stronger, Hayden forcibly endured almost repeated exercise every day, rushing, killing the enemy, exercising, and the gods, and passing day after day mechanically. Seeing and hearing color, armed color, spiritual pressure, illusion, as well as Chiban Sakura's first solution, and Shu Shirayuki's swastika, each ability has become more advanced with the passage of time. At this moment, on an unnamed island in the windless zone near the East China Sea, there are few windless islands, and the flora and fauna on the islands are exaggerated to an incredible degree. All kinds of weird plants grow savagely, and the various beasts can't believe it. Of course, this is only for the average person, in a natural hot spring on the island. Hayden, who has disappeared for 3 years, is closing his eyes and resting, preparing for the next. The body below his head was soaked in this hot spring that exuded a strong sulfur smell. Advertisement on the ground just beside the hot springs. There are 2 beasts that are big enough to fill the hot springs of the size of a swimming pool. They look like orangutans. They didn't come to this hot spring to kill the invader Hayden, but... "Boss, is our fan wind okay?" said the gorilla, who was holding a big leaf on the side, carefully fanning Hayden. Then the gorilla opposite it added, "Boss, it's not our 2 brothers. Our fan is the best fan in this area." Its tone seemed to be proud of their brother's skills. Hayden didn't open his eyes, and nodded. "You 2 can do it. Ape 1, Ape 2, good work." There was a hint of appreciation in his tone. Hayden likes to feel the breeze blowing around him in the hot springs, putting himself in a delicate state between hot and cool. Suddenly, in the silence of this atmosphere, Hayden still closed his eyes, and said faintly, "Sha Yi, newspaper." Hearing what the boss said, the apes seemed to have done the next thing many times, yes. After he replied, his strong legs slammed, and his body jumped high. Then, a while passed quickly. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After a loud bang, Xiao Yi, who landed, held a newspaper in his hand that was obviously too different from the size of his palm. "Boss. This is today's newspaper. The time now is early in the morning." The time when the general newsbird delivers the newspaper is not at this point in time. "Okay." Hayden couldn't help frowning, and after catching the newspaper, he opened his eyes. For the past 3 years, his only entertainment time every day has been to read Newsbird's newspaper. Hayden would read every newspaper that he sent, word by word. Advertisement, however, he didn't notice anything worthy of his attention in the past few years. Some days ago, Odahime, the queen of Fishman Island, had a lot of trouble with Fishman Island, and said that he would move Fishman Island to land. There is also that the seaman is very peaceful, and in this period of time becomes the Kiwahai. Hayden looked back at the newspaper that seemed to be delivered early today, while recalling past events in his heart. Still nothing worth noting. He thought to himself, as he read page after page, his frowning brows gradually eased. The newspaper came to the last page. That is, News agencies are used to put some gossip, or news that dare not put in the newspaper. Anyway, there are all kinds of unconfirmed news, deceptive and true, and it depends on the people who read it to distinguish. Shocked. Recently, an unknown force actually robbed the heavenly gold, Hayden whispered silently. Heavenly gold? When Hayden saw this special term, he immediately remembered what heavenly gold is. To put it simply, the members of the countries of the world government have to turn in their treasures to the Tianlong people every year. And this collection of treasure is the treasure of more than 170 participating countries around the world. The treasure value of heavenly gold is as high as a kind of horror. Many participating countries do not hand in real and usable berry. Instead, they hand in special products in their respective countries, and some local special products have even exceeded the price of the special products in the market. In general, except for the Tianlongren, for any person, this is only 1 year of heavenly gold, which is enough to spare him most of his life. Someone robbed the gold from the sky. Hayden couldn't help frowning again and thinking. The existence of heavenly gold is not as mysterious as it sounds. It is impossible to keep a secret that more than 170 participating countries have to turn in every year. Advertisement. It's just because everyone knows that the heavenly gold is for the Tianlong people, and no one has the brain to dare to provoke the Tianlong people. Dare to provoke the existence of the Tianlong people. The heavenly gold is of little value to them. Coincidentally, Hayden was feeling that his strength could no longer grow recently, so he also planned to find a day to return to the sea. Of course, it is not intended to be swaggered and appear in the eyes of the world government. This time go to sea. He has considered all aspects of Hayden. First of all, in order to build an invincible warship for yourself in the future, as well as overturn the world, you need to spend money. He was worrying about the source of funds, but he didn't think about it. This small piece of news provided him with an excellent idea. 1, 2, it seems time for me to leave here. Hayden threw away the newspaper and stood up from the hot spring pool, revealing a sturdy body covered with large and small scars. What? Apes 1, Apes 2 and the 2 apes were immediately surprised by Hayden's words. No, I was so shocked that I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that their boss planned to leave. Didn't you say good forever? Apes 1 and 2 apes, with very sad expressions, looked at the boss in his clothes. As for the 2 apes, no one knows what they're thinking. After a while, Hayden was already neatly dressed. He wore a straw hat on his head, and he was wearing a systematic slim death tyrant outfit, and he was draped with a pale pink houri that was almost pure white. Finally, he put a one-eyed black blindfold on his left eye. Suddenly, a strong sense of oppression burst out of Hayden's body. But then it disappeared, so that the 2 people who felt the oppression of Apes 1 and Apes 2 thought it was their own illusion. Chapter 241. Revisit the old place, Chambord Islands. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After that, Hayden had no nostalgia. Dang even left this small island in the windless belt, carrying the 300 million bell that he had saved over the past 3 years, and carrying it behind him in a large backpack. The windless zone he is currently in is close to the side of the East China Sea. Judging from the map, after going out of the windless zone, he is on the left side of the Great Route. The 7 Great Routes, on the left, are the city of the Queen of Spring, the city of 7 Waters, the Devil's Triangle, and the Chambord Islands. In order to confirm the correctness of the heavenly gold news, Hayden, who had no intelligence sources, had to go to places like underground black markets to confirm the intelligence. As for the underground black market, underground intelligence, etc., all the places with the densest and most prosperous black transactions, Hayden has been walking around in the past 3 years, and he has not found a place comparable to it. Those who want to go to the New World must buy the island Chambord Islands. And so, here we go again. Hayden had to go to the Chambord Islands again, to the islands that he had never set foot on since the Demon Void incident. After a week in the sky, Hayden finally found an island like the Chambordian Islands in the line of sight ahead. However, it was not that it would take him a week or so to hurry, but he didn't have anything to show the way. No pointers, no map, all by feeling. Hula, the air swept across the Death Tyrant's outfit and across the hat. Hayden stared at the Chambordian Islands not far ahead, lost in memory. The current Chambordian Islands is like a whole forest, with half of the trunk cut off, leaving only a mutilated appearance. Advertisement 3 years seems to be a long time, but for the Yakuman mangrove towering over the sky, it is only a blink of an eye, and it will not recover like magic. However, although most of the mangrove trunk was cut off, only half remained. However, the roots of the trees that plunged deep into the sea, forming the roots of the earth, still gave birth to one after another, inexhaustible soap bubbles from the surface. Hayden, who landed on the island from the left, came to the area of the original hotel street. Looking at the surrounding area except for the destruction of the mangrove trees on the island, there is no obvious trace left by the war in other places. The mangroves will not recover miraculously in 3 years, but the people living on the island can recover quickly. After all, this Shambordian Islands is always the only way to the New World. As long as there are people here, the Shambordian Islands will always exist. Boss, here's a map, Hayden said to the owner of a small newsstand. Oh, here comes. The boss with a book in his hand immediately closed it, and then removed a map from the newspaper rack closest to his seat. 500 berries. The boss said. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden didn't reach out to pick up the newspaper. Instead, he took out a 2,000 berry note from his clothes. I'll give you 2,000 berry. Tell me what needs attention on this island. 2,000 Baileys were put on the magazine pile in front of the newsstand owner. The newsstand owner was shocked. Of course he did not let go of this opportunity to make money. Ha 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 ha, no problem. He laughed, and after collecting the 2,000 berry, he handed the map to Hayden, and then began to talk. Hayden took the newspaper at will and listened carefully to the information in the man's words. You haven't been to Chambord before. The situation on the island has been different since the world-destroying war 3 years ago. If you were here to play, it would be nice to come 3 years earlier. That's fine. At that time, the big broken trees you see now are all intact, the magnificence, tut. Cough cough cough. Advertisement. Watching the distracted boss, Hayden coughed twice. Oh, I'm sorry. The boss laughed awkwardly, and then told Hayden. Now number 0 to 9 and number 60 to 69 are the Navy territory. If you have any trouble, you can find it. Subsequently, the boss said a lot about the distribution. In general, the Navy took advantage of the situation and occupied one more area, and the places where the mangroves were not destroyed remained intact. In the rest of the destroyed places, some places no one went to build, and some places built new buildings. However, these are not the news that Hayden wants to hear. Boss, I said, what about those illegal areas? Looking at the silent boss, Hayden asked immediately. Illegal area? The time-honored newsstand owner murmured at this time, I haven't heard of this before. Have you confused the Shambordian Islands with other places? Hayden sighed, and took out a 1,000 worth Bailey from his pocket. Now, he put Bailey again where you put the money. Hee. The boss smiled and put Barry away. If you want to seek excitement, you can go to the 16th, 12th, and 14th. You will know where you go. The information is at hand. Hayden didn't spend more than a second in this place, and went straight to the island number 16. In the area numbered 10 to 19, next to the hotel street, Hayden did not walk through a few small islands before he came to the illegal zone on the 16th. Along the way, Hayden saw many traces of new construction. But in his eyes, those are not things to be happy about, but represent more scars, because of the scars caused by his lack of strength. Of course, the Yakuman mangrove on the 16th island was not spared either. But, advertisement. The people on this small island hollowed out the fallen mangrove trunks and turned it into another kind of bazaar. The huge tree trunk that fell down connects the small island on the other end. Hayden stopped at the entrance of the huge tree trunk. Looking up at the cross-section of the tree trunk, it is covered with various signs, colorful. Punk family murder clubs, bad dead gangs, Ronin detective offices, etc. Anyway, are things that are only available in all kinds of underground worlds. Hayden shook his head and didn't look any further. He then walked in from a small door in front, which seemed to be the only one. Huo ran. After pushing the door and walking in, Hayden felt as if he had walked into another world. Outside the small gate is a deadly post-war scene, and inside the small gate is a lush market filled with people. The underground market is no longer just a place where one street can be walked. It is not only the first floor that is standing now, but also the second, third, and fourth floors above the head. The entire underground world was presented in front of Hayden in 3 dimensions. The boss of this place is probably only Tianlong people, Hayden murmured as he walked around. These black transactions were placed in such a generous manner, and the only thing blocking these things was the poor little door at the entrance. Hayden shook his head, no longer thinking about these insignificant things. What he now needs to find is a place to sell information. Suddenly, Hayden, who was walking, seemed to see a sign with the word intelligence from the corner of his eye. Chapter 242 Old Friend is fine. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Hayden walked into the information store that Yu Guang saw. He stayed in there for a while, spending 5 million Baileys to verify the truth of the heavenly gold incident. The gold in the sky was attacked, and indeed something happened. However, he spent 5 million Baileys and only got the truth of the news. However, Hayden, who had not obtained complete information, did not continue to search for information in this place. After he left this information store, he found a different information store in the market. It cost him 5 million bell to just confirm a piece of news. For the sake of complete heavenly gold information, Hayden didn't think the 300 million bell in his backpack was enough for him. In order to prevent more extortion, he thought about changing places every time he got a piece of information. In front of the second intelligence store, Undersea Communication Intelligence Chain Agency, Hayden stood in front of a shop decorated in an aquarium style, and read the sign on the door. Looking at the little fishes swimming in the shop windows on both sides of the door, they were all strange species that he had never seen before. After standing at the door for a while, he didn't express his thoughts, and then walked directly in. Ling ling. The bell on the glass door rang due to the action of pushing the door. The ringing bell immediately aroused the reaction of the staff in the store. A lady behind the counter at the entrance of the store immediately asked Dao Hayden, "Sir, do you need some help?" Hayden didn't respond immediately, and first checked this small hall where the entrance was not large. There is a pot of aquatic plants in the corners on the left and right, and a signboard is hung on the light blue wall, on which the newspapers, lists and the like of each family are nailed with nails. Advertisement. Then Hayden turned his gaze to the staff behind the front counter. "I need information," he simply told the front desk lady. Then, the lady at the front desk looked at the strangely dressed guest who concealed her identity. She had no other thoughts. "Sir, please here." She smiled slightly, and stretched out her hand to signal the guests in front of her to follow her. The lady at the front desk led Hayden into the interior from the left passage, walked through the short corridor, and pushed open a double door. Then Hayden walked into an unusually spacious hall. From the outside door, I would never imagine that there is such a big room in this store. The smooth floor is clean and tidy, just like a bank lobby. At this moment, the rows of separated counters that appeared in front of Hayden's line of sight were more like walking into the lobby of a bank. "Sir, you can go to the counter over there next," the lady at the front desk told Hayden, pointing to an empty counter. "Okay." Hayden nodded, not showing his surprise. He looked at the counters with people on the left and right, and couldn't help sighing in his heart. The business of this store is okay. "Go to the counter." Hayden looked at the only small hole on the partition in front of him, which was about the same size as the cash withdrawal port. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. There is also an instruction poster on the partition. The required information is written on the paper at the counter and passed into the hole, and the cost will be determined according to the information provided. Hayden did not speak. This store looks more grander than the one just now, which means that the services they provide will definitely be more expensive. He didn't want to make any noise, but for the sake of heaven's gold, Hayden endured it. He wrote the question, "Who attacked the gold in the sky?" After passing into the hole, there was a rustling sound from behind the partition. After a while, a list floated out from behind the partition. Hayden immediately took the list and said silently, "Intelligence costs 20 million Baileys." Advertisement. 20 million? Gone. The atmosphere in Hayden was not right. With a calm face, he took out 20 million Bailey and handed it in. Soon, a small note floated out of it. Hayden took the note, his eyes focused on the information written on the note. Don Quixote family. There is only one name on the note. Suddenly, Hayden, with a calm face, stared at the word Don Quixote family, but his face immediately raised a smile. Memories are evoked by this word. The picture in my mind immediately appeared, the previous days in Beihai. There seemed to be a burning sensation on the chest again. Doflamingo, really only you dare to do this kind of thing. Hayden couldn't help stroking his chest. Doflamingo's faint scar left, muttering to himself, hidden in the eyes under the hat, a trace of horrible killing flashed. It just so happened, now we can go to avenge the grudges, and take revenge together. After that, Hayden changed another intelligence agency and spent almost 10 million Baileys to obtain the approximate location of the Doflamingo family. However, the Doflamingo family is not in a position that favors Hayden. Their entire family is now on the other side of the Red Earth continent, which is the second half of the Great Root, the New World. This momentarily troubled Hayden. If they are in the New World, they themselves have to go to the New World. Advertisement: if you want to go to the New World, there are only two options. One is to apply to the world government to take a special bubble tool to cross the Red Earth continent to the New World on the other side. It will not only cost a lot of money, but also a lot of time. The second is to coat the boat with a layer of Yakuman mangrove resin, and then dive to a depth of about 10,000 meters under the sea, after passing through the submarine route, Merman Island, to reach the New World. The first path needs to apply to the world government. For Hayden, you don't need to look at it, just discard it. His only choice is the second way. Coat the boat, then dive to the bottom of the sea for 10,000 meters, after passing through the Fisherman Island, arrive at the New World. However, where did he change into a boat? Even if he spends money to buy a boat, how can he move it alone? Pay someone to pay. He wouldn't believe someone he didn't even understand when he was 10,000 meters under the sea. As for the particularity of Hayden's ability to take the air, instead, he could choose to pedal all the way to the Red Earth continent, and then swagger through the Holy Land Mariagioa to the New World. But he didn't want to die early. Out of the information store, Hayden was clueless, wandering aimlessly in this huge mangrove market. How to get to Fishman Island is a very troublesome question for him at this moment. Hayden frowned and looked left and right on the crowded street. Suddenly, he noticed a slightly crowded place in front of him. After approaching, he stood in front of an erect wooden board, watching the words on it, "The White Dragon Fleet, shuttled under the Red Earth continent." He silently read the sign in front. Behind the signboard, there is a place full of wooden boxes, where porters come and go. Smuggling the fleet. Hayden realized this. As for how he should get to Fishman Island, to the New World, he immediately had an idea. Chapter 243 Reiki Airwave Previous Chapter Next Chapter. Advertisement: the first day in the Chambord Islands quickly passed. Under the continued growth of money, Hayden turned himself into a role as a bounty hunter, and now he needed to go to the New World. He joined the White Dragon Fleet and became one of them. However, Hayden had only seen Gerald, the captain of their White Dragon Fleet, alone yesterday, and had not seen anyone else in the fleet. Early in the morning, Hayden rushed to the island number 42. This is where their White Dragon Fleet anchored. Because the island 42 is a small island outside the Chambord Islands, and it is in a straight line with the Area 20, it has not been destroyed too much. There are many tourists and many entertainment facilities. These smugglers are really not afraid of the Navy. Hayden was observing the surroundings, and he couldn't help murmuring and sighing. Go to the very edge of the island. There are some fishing shops on the surrounding shore, providing some fishing gear, as well as ancillary things. A row of benches are placed on the shore for fishing tourists to rest. On the shore to the left of the fishing shop, 3 Spanish galleons were anchored impressively. A large 3-masted sailing ship, the whole shape of the hull is like a movable castle. The neatly arranged black holes on the ship bring a strong sense of oppression to anyone who understands what the black holes mean. Sure enough, those who dared to cross the bottom of the sea to do business are magnificent. Even Hayden, he couldn't help but admiration when he saw this scene. Hayden didn't continue watching from the shore, and then went straight up from the gangway that was on the shore of the big sailboat. So, is this the White Dragon Fleet? Advertisement? Wearing a hat, Hayden, who was completely covered in the shadow, asked a little from his mouth. And on this huge castle, the sailors who were doing various preparations suddenly saw Hayden, a man who dared not show his true face. Suddenly, the atmosphere on the deck became wrong. The White Dragon Fleet is not a serious business fleet. The sailors in the fleet are not ordinary sailors. A large part of them are reward criminals. Although the amount may not be high, they are basically not ordinary people. But this is, of course, where ordinary people would dare to dive into the Fisherman Island 10,000 meters below the seabed, let alone go to the New World. Similarly, this also means that their group has many enemies. Man, I think you are on the wrong boat. Behind the group of sailors, there was a strong man with a temperament that was clearly distinguishable from the others, and slowly walked in front of Hayden. When his voice fell, it seemed that the command was also sounded at the same time. The sailors around who were preparing to set sail suddenly surrounded Hayden, who was standing on the deck. With the sudden formation of the encirclement, the tension on the deck increased sharply. "I'm looking for your Captain Gerard," Hayden still said lightly. "Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. If he can, he still doesn't want to mess with these people." After all, when they were going to dive under 10,000 meters under the sea together, he didn't know whether his physical strength could resist it, and he didn't want to know. Then, just when something bad is about to happen, Captain Gerard, the White Dragon fleet with 3 Spanish galleons, came up from the gangway and stepped onto the tense deck. Hayden noticed him, and all his men on the ship noticed him. Similarly, Captain Gerard also noticed all of them. However, the captain who boarded the deck didn't want to explain Hayden's current situation. He stood aside and didn't give any indication. Advertisement. Hayden retracted his gaze, and the people surrounding Hayden also retracted their gazes. Hayden sighed, who was concealed by the hat. Sure enough, this kind of person would always cause him trouble. Hayden, who understood the situation at the moment, was ready. Suddenly, the sailors who surrounded Hayden looked at the swordsman with 2 knives in his sight, directly took out their flintlock guns, and shot Hayden, who was shrouded in the shadows. Boom! 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 The black projectile was ejected from the muzzle with super-fast speed. For a moment, a burst of fire flashed from their respective muzzles, as well as deafening gunshots. This bullet storm with no dead-angle attack is no longer a threat to Hayden. Boom! Hayden glared at the captain of the White Dragon fleet, Gerard, and suddenly released the spiritual pressure accumulated on his body. The invisible reinforced air wave disintegrated all the projectiles in an instant, and then, like a gust of wind, immediately swept the deck of this Spanish galleon. For an instant, on this deck, everyone who was swallowed up by this violent wind could not help being stunned by the panic that came out of their hearts. Then they didn't wait for them to understand where this fear was born, even if their legs were out of their control. Puff! 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 One by one on the deck fell like dominoes that triggered a chain reaction. Hayden sighed and retracted the burst of spiritual pressure. Advertisement. Fortunately, there is a blindfold that devours ray pressure, otherwise it is impossible for my ray pressure to simulate the effect of the Overlord. He thought to himself, then looked around on the lower deck to see if that guy could still keep his posture. "You. Who are you?" A faint voice suddenly sounded on the silent deck. "Oh, you can hold on, amazing." Hayden turned and looked to the side. Captain Gerard, who was standing by the side of the ship, said, "Who I am does not need you to know, as long as you can follow the agreement we reached yesterday." Captain Gerard, with sweat beads on his forehead, and the captain's cap on his head was wet with sweat. Looking at the person hiding his figure under the hat in his eyes, he didn't know if it was correct to agree to this person's request yesterday. "By the way, where is my cabin?" Hayden continued talking to Captain Gerard. But he looked at the person in front of him again, as if he didn't have the energy to answer his questions. I will find it myself," he continued thoughtfully. The implication is that when he sees which room he likes, he will stay in which room temporarily. Subsequently, Hayden no longer paid attention to the people on the deck. He stepped on the gap between the fallen people on the deck and walked slowly towards the cabin. The figure wearing a hat was drifting away in the sight of Captain Gerard. The inexplicable meaning in his heart also rose slowly. This guy is definitely not a bounty hunter. Gerard quickly came to this conclusion in his mind. He dared to lead 3 big sailing ships to take the Fisherman Island route to do business in the New World, which naturally means that he is also not a person to provoke. It also means that he has seen many things and many people. However, he has never met such a person who makes him feel bad. Chapter 244 to 10,000 meters under the sea. Previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement over 10 minutes later. The people on the deck who were deterred by Hayden's spiritual pressure also gradually recovered at this time. However, without exception, there were very complex emotions remaining on everyone's faces, either panic or at a loss. Okay. The Captain Gerard, who was relieved, shouted loudly. That person is the one I promised to come down yesterday. He will go with us to the New World. He told the rest of the fleet. As for the people who were still in a state of fright, they nodded in a daze, expressing their understanding. Then, without the need for Gerard to issue an order, everyone immediately returned to their previous posts. 10 minutes passed. The 3 Spanish galleons of the White Dragon fleet are all ready for the penultimate dive, and only one step away, their 3 large ships can dive directly into the sea. Immediately afterwards, a person on the boat jumped into the sea, swam under the hull, and let go of the floating bag placed on the hull. Just listen, his hiss. A sound like a balloon inflated. Okay. Hayden in the cabin immediately saw the substantial changes brought about by this sound. The film coated on the entire hull gradually expanded with the sound of the sound, submerged the calf, submerged the waist, and finally shrouded the entire ship in a huge soap bubble. Is this the membrane that can withstand the pressure of the seabed? Hayden couldn't help walking from the cabin to the deck, muttering to himself. He has never boarded a thoroughly coated vessel. Hayden couldn't help but walk to the side of the boat and reached out and touched the soap bubbles on the periphery, feeling no different from those on the Chambord Islands. And just this single layer of bubble film can allow their big ship to withstand the infinite pressure of the sea and dive to a depth of 10,000 meters under the sea. Rao is Hayden, who has the strength to cut through the mountains with a single blow, and can't help feeling a sense of awe for the products of this world's nature. Tell the other 2 ships, Gerald, the captain of the White Dragon fleet, shouted to the flag bearer, we should dive. Words fall. Advertisement shattering. The huge galleon suddenly began to shake violently, causing the seawater around the hull to churn up pure white waves. Standing on the deck, Hayden could clearly feel that the hull under his feet was gradually sinking below the surface of the sea, and a sense of tension rose in his heart. This is always the case for the first time, embracing a touch of tension and expectation for the unknown domain. Boom! The huge 3-masted sailboat sank completely under the sea. Some time passed. The 3 Spanish galleons were sinking to the bottom of the sea without stopping. In the surrounding 360-degree viewing angle of view, the number of fish appearing is also increasing and more different. But what has not changed in the eyes of everyone on the ship is always around their hull, the huge roots of the Yarcum and mangrove. The huge tree roots stretched into the darkness below. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden only knew, and then remembered that the roots of the destroyed trees in the Chambord Islands above may not be less than 1/100th of the length of the Yarcum and mangroves. The light projected from the sky into the sea gradually dimmed with the depth of the dive. For everyone on board, the familiar world, the world that can be controlled, is going away little by little. They are small, about to enter a world that does not belong to them. Subsequently, the White Dragon fleet came to an underwater waterfall with a diameter of several hundred meters. The waterfall is falling towards the dark seabed at a terrifying speed. Want to reach the deep sea, but not only after coating the ship, but just waiting for the ship itself to fall towards the bottom of the sea. To reach the deep ocean, one must find a deep ocean current that leads directly to the deep ocean from a relatively calm ocean current on the surface. Advertisement and the huge waterfall in front of everyone is a deep ocean current leading to the deep sea. Then, under the command of the Captain Gerard, who is familiar with the seabed routes, the 3 large sailing ships entered the deep ocean current 10,000 meters directly to the seabed. The light disappeared. The whole world around seemed to only be able to perceive each other's breathing, as well as the slight sound of the boat's bow moving across the water. At this time, the surrounding area was completely dark. Even if Hayden was domineering, he couldn't perceive clearly what was around him. When there is nothing around and nothing can be seen, it is easier to blur the feeling after seeing and hearing color is turned on. But this situation also means that their fleet has reached the bottom of the sea at a depth of about 7 kilometers. Snapped, snapped, snapped. The sound of a certain switch turned on suddenly sounded. Immediately, in the extremely dark world, there was light that could see the world around him clearly. In a circle around the hulls of 3 huge sailing ships, several bright searchlights were lit. As a result, just as Hayden thought that these guys still had something. In the surrounding sea water illuminated by the strong light, all kinds of sea beasts that were too big to be believed suddenly appeared. The distance is too close. Hayden looked around the situation around the hull, and their 3 ships now shuttled among the sea animals. He couldn't help but put his hand on Shirayuki's waist sleeve to get ready. This is the situation now. As long as that sea beast suddenly looked at them unpleasantly, one bite could swallow one of their ships directly. But for them who lost the bubble film, it doesn't take a second to be instantly resolved by the pressure in the seawater. But it's okay. The White Dragon Fleet, which specializes in business, seems to have a special way to deal with sea animals. Among the terrifying sea animals, the 3 large sailing ships continued to march toward the depths of the seabed. I don't know how long the time has passed. Advertisement. Suddenly, a light appeared in front of him. That light is not the light of a strong searchlight, but the kind of light that is closer to natural light. The fleet slowly approached the light. Then, without everyone realizing it, they were shrouded in dazzling light, and they even blurred everyone's eyes for a period of time. Boom! After a dull sound, Hayden felt the boat under his feet touch some kind of ground. The blurred vision gradually became clear. Hayden looked in the direction of the bow of the ship subconsciously. Then, in the reflection of his pupils, a huge bubble floating in the center of the seabed was reflected. Under the dazzling light, the surroundings are all in the sea, surrounded by schools of fish in various poses. The legendary Fisherman Island appeared in front of everyone. Such an amazing world. Hayden looked at the Fisherman Island not far ahead, his eyes widened and his mouth opened wide. As a person who has traveled through, although he has seen a variety of strange worlds for more than 10 years. However, the Fisherman Island in front of us is different, completely different, and different on another level. This strong impact and visual sensation cannot be described in words at all. Merman Island, we're here. Captain Gerard stood on the bow and announced loudly to his sailors. Even though he had seen it many times, he couldn't help showing excitement every time he saw this wonder of the world. Chapter 245 Murloc Island. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The dazzling sun, air, white clouds. Many things that are unique to the world on Earth also exist on the seabed at a depth of 10,000 meters. Under the sunshine from the huge sun tree, the 3 Spanish galleons of the White Dragon Fleet slowly sailed towards the front entrance of the Fisherman Island. After being notified to the Fisherman Island, the White Dragon Fleet that Hayden boarded exited the passage into the Fisherman Island and smoothly entered the world of the Fisherman Island. Soon, everyone felt the presence of air. They felt like the light of the world on the ground during the day, the fresh air, and the feeling of a ship sailing on the sea again. They came, on the surface of another world, at a depth of about 10,000 meters under the sea. This is so special, it's too magical. Hayden couldn't help sighing when he saw this scene for the first time. They are now galloping on the sea off Fishman Island and are preparing to sail to the port of Fishman Island. If Hayden, who was standing on the deck, was not allowed to look at the deep sea outside through the bubbles that enveloped the Fisherman Island, he would never believe that he was in the deep sea now, a place that ordinary humans could not reach. Awesome, Fishman Island. Captain Gerard walked up to Hayden at this time and said proudly, with a smile like a master's face on his face. Even though he had been to Murloc Island many times, after diving for a long time of 10,000 meters, he suddenly saw the sky, white clouds, and sunlight, all of which are familiar to humans, and he still felt extremely excited. That kind of strong freshness, in the case of Fishman Island, will never fade. Advertisement, it's really amazing. Hayden replied to the Captain Gerard beside him. It seems that these guys are quite honest after being frightened. Hayden thought, and immediately asked the question he wanted to ask, so, how do we get to the new world from now on? Do we need to stay on Fishman Island? Oh, this, Captain Gerard thought for a while, then told Hayden. Because it takes half a day to record the pointer. There are various things that need to be handled on Murloc Island. I will probably stay on Fishman Island for 2 days. After listening, Hayden showed a thoughtful expression. Really? Port of Murloc Island. 3 huge castle-style 3-masted sailboats are moored here. Hayden was standing on the side of the ship, looking towards the harbor of Murloc Island. The harbor is surrounded by small marine-style buildings, and the ground also looks like a coral pattern in a light color. Although it was a little different from what Hayden had imagined in his mind, it was roughly the same. As for the Murlocs or merfolks near the port of Murloc Island, they are not unfamiliar with these 3 external sailing ships. Although some of them showed a little disgusting expression, they did not pay much attention to them. In this very delicate period, the landing of humans on Murloc Island is not an excellent travel plan. Queen Odahime, the Queen of the Dragon Palace Kingdom on the Murloc Island. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Every day, she speaks in the crowded areas of Fishman Island, hoping that everyone can pay attention to the activities of emigrating to land and collect signatures from the people. However, just as she worked tirelessly to improve everyone's perception of humans, she signed her name on the proposal to move to land. At the same time, what happened in the human world on the sea, and the death of the great hero of Murloc Island, Fisher Tiger, made the citizens of Murloc Island really unable to believe in humans. Princess Odahime's speech made everyone start paying attention to humans. But similarly, the news of Fisher Tiger made them even more angry. Advertisement in such a tense situation, it lasted until 1514 in the Hyuan calendar, which is the time when Hayden and the others landed on the Fisherman Island. That, Captain Gerard said to Hayden with a careful expression, although we are going to stop at Fishman Island for 2 days, I advise you to stay on this ship for these 2 days. Fortunately, they are a fleet of a big man, otherwise they would not dare to come to Fishman Island during this period. Although the banner of that big man can protect them from trouble, it can't solve the trouble they caused. It's better to keep a low profile at this time. Why? Hayden asked immediately. He didn't understand what this meant. Although the destination is to go to the New World, but now it has been down to the Fisherman Island 10,000 meters under the sea. You actually told me to stay on the boat for 2 days, then don't go? Captain Gerard was stuffed, even though he expected that the unknown big man in front of him would be the answer. Just look at the Murlocs around us staring at us, he then replied to Hayden's question. The fish people around, with unfriendly eyes, stared at the humans on their side of the White Dragon fleet, watching the sailors remove all kinds of things from the boat. That's it. Hayden didn't think these Murlocs could cause him any trouble, but instead, just don't come and provoke him. Captain Gerard was speechless again. He began to regret that he was greedy for the Bailey this guy gave him. Sure enough, people shouldn't be allowed to join their voyage casually. Captain Gerard no longer discourages Hayden's ideas. Anyway, there should be no problem with this guy's strength. If this guy gets into any trouble, he can just leave it here at that time. Advertisement Captain Gerald, he would not choose Murloc Island to fight the Murloc. The crew members of the White Dragon fleet are doing their jobs at the Fisherman Island port, presenting a busy scene. Hayden, who took a downwind boat, stepped onto the port of Murloc Island and began to walk towards the place where there were the most Murlocs and mermaids in sight. Then, he got off the human ship, wearing a hat on his head and fancy clothes on his body, covering the true face of Hayden and walking on the street where Murlocs and mermaids were mixed. Putting on him against countless ways, all kinds of eyes. Hayden's head was like a spinning top, looking at a strange world that he had never seen before. At this moment, he couldn't wait for his head to rotate 360 degrees like a spinning top. Beautiful mermaid, hot mermaid, mature mermaid. Walking on the bustling streets, passing him by, are all mermaids who make people unable to control their instinctive impulses. A beautiful face, a beautiful figure, and a pair of shiny fish tails. The upper body of human beings, the lower body of fish. A taboo body formed by the combination of humans and fish. My boy. Hidden under the hat was Hayden's uncontrollable expression of excitement. This living, this close at hand, with this strong visual impact, he fully understood Sanji's excitement after he landed on the Fisherman Island. At this moment, Hayden felt like he was in the vortex of charm of a mermaid, hard to extricate himself, and he didn't want to extricate himself. Heaven is nothing more than that, of course. Hayden just imagined it in his mind, and didn't take any actual action. He continued to wander towards the rest of the Fisherman Island. Chapter 246 Queen of Murloc Island, Princess Odahime. Previous chapter next chapter advertisement after that. Hayden treats himself completely as a tourist, wandering around the area near the Fisherman Island port. Follow the street with the most people and keep walking forward. Before you know it, Hayden felt that he had arrived, a place where murlocs and mermaids were relatively dense. Looking around, it seems that where I am now is like a naturally formed coral basin. The surrounding area is surrounded by towering coral buildings, surrounding the ground where he is standing at this moment. He seems to have come to the square of Fishman Island? Hayden was a little confused and thought, and then he checked what was worth his attention nearby. To be honest, although he came to Fishman Island and saw so many wonders, he didn't really want to do anything. If there is one thing I really want to do, it is to bring Robin here. It seems that Murloc Island also has a piece of history. Hayden wandered aimlessly in the square on Fishman Island, like an old lady walking in the square after dinner. Feel the lively atmosphere different from the human world around. Suddenly, on the plaza with people coming and going, Hayden's ear caught an unusual sound. Okay. Hayden frowned and turned to the source of the sound. Then I saw. Advertisement. There was a mermaid dressed up, who was obviously different from the ordinary murlocs nearby, and the mermaid ladies, standing on a wooden box, speaking passionately about something at a height higher than the average murlocs. Let us coexist with mankind hand in hand. Together in the dazzling sun. Improve your understanding of their humanity. The speaker kept wavy blonde hair and wore a robe with an orange fish scale pattern. Around her, there seemed to be some murlocs dressed as guards, with her as the center of protection. Hayden observed again, the murlocs and mermaids around him, their attitude towards the mermaids standing on the wooden box. A little fear, a little helpless, a little embarrassment, and a little pitiful. At this time, Hayden probably understood the identity of the mermaid. Although he has not seen the real photo of this mermaid. But there was a lot of news about this mermaid in the tabloids a while ago. After all, it is about the queen of a country. Even if there is a barrier of 10,000 meters under the sea, the news can still spread far, far. This mermaid dressed as if surpassing the ordinary people is the queen of the Dragon Palace Kingdom on the Fisherman Island, Princess Odahime. You too. Please sign this form quickly. After a speech, Princess Odahime randomly pointed at a murloc who was passing by and motioned to him to sign his name on the letter of national intent in her hand, expressing approval of the proposal to move the Murloc Island to land. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. You. And you. Princess Odahime pointed to any murloc or mermaid she could point to, and motioned to all of them to sign their names on the national letter of intent in her hand. However, as the queen of their Fisherman Island Dragon Palace Kingdom, this noble status is only brought to her at this moment, and is not treated as a fool. Advertisement. None of the murlocs or mermaids in the square agreed with their proposal of Princess Odahime. Perhaps some people were infected by the passionate atmosphere of Princess Odahime and signed their name, hoping that one day, the bright future of Princess Odahime's speech can be realized. However, such people are also very small and almost negligible. However, Princess Odahime did not show any discouraged expression, not even a trace of it. Hayden, who was observing silently, thought to himself. Changing to another person, experiencing what happened to Princess Odahime in front of him just now, is that everyone will be deeply shocked by what happened to her. But this Princess Odahime seems to be like this every day. Even so, she still maintains a good attitude. Hidden under the hat, Hayden silently looked at the Princess Odahime in front of him. At this moment, his heart was strongly impacted. This kind of shock is different from the kind of powerful shock, like blasting a big mountain with a punch. It's a kind of unspeakable, just doing something very ordinary, it will naturally emit a strong impact. Suddenly, at this moment when Hayden was meditating, Princess Odahime, who was still more than 10 meters away from Hayden in the last second, appeared in front of Hayden like a teleportation, appeared in front of Hayden, who was wearing a hat and wearing fancy clothes. Hayden was taken aback by Princess Odahime's actions. He didn't seem to realize how conspicuous the outfit he was wearing was compared to the dress, and how it attracted everyone's attention in a world full of murlocs and merfolk. You too. Hurry up and sign. Princess Odahime spoke to the person in front of her who was hidden under the hat in a tone that could not be rejected. Despite her unwilling tone, it didn't work from the beginning. Hayden did not respond immediately. Advertisement. He slowly raised his head and adjusted his gaze to the point where he could just see the signature sheet in the hands of Princess Odahime, without exposing his face to everyone's sight. However, his movement of raising his head slightly made the guard of Princess Odahime nervous. Although their Fishman Island does not stipulate that they are not allowed to cover their faces and go out, there is such a guy who dared not show his face, just at the distance that His Highness Odahime can reach. His Royal Highness Odahime, let's stop here today. The captain of the guard asked His Royal Highness Odahime in a pleading tone. At this time, all the guards stopped at the position beside Her Royal Highness Odahime and Hayden, forming an encircling formation. No, Princess Odahime did not agree, and at the same time motioned them to stop. After speaking, she continued to look at Hayden, who hadn't spoken yet. Hayden didn't care about the guards surrounding him. He was curious about how many people signed on the signature sheet. In fact, as early as the first glance after seeing the sheet, he read all the names on it. There are only a few names on it, which is in sharp contrast with the large blank space on the signature sheet. The reason why he was silent for such a while, in fact, because he looked at Princess Odahime and the current dilemma of Murloc Island, he had an idea in his mind. Hayden slowly raised the hat to the angle where Princess Odahime could see his lips. Prince Odahime, if you really want to move the Murloc Island to the ground, wait a minute, you can go to the White Dragon in the port. The fleet, it was said that it was looking for someone named Smog. While he spoke lightly, he also released a weak part of his spiritual pressure. The invisible spiritual pressure was like a breeze, blowing towards the surrounding areas centered on him. The breeze blew over Princess Odahime, causing her mind to shake slightly. Suddenly, her eyes changed when she looked at the person hiding in front of her under the hat. Chapter 247 Royal Invitation Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement. Hello. Who is that guy? Do not know. How did Your Highness Odahime see that person, as if he had changed someone? Do not know. In the square, the Murlocs and mermaids were talking quietly. The mysterious person hidden under the hat, after leaving an inexplicable word. The mysterious man who hid his face in the shadows then left the square on the Fisherman Island. Princess Odahime looked at the leaving figure of Hayden. She did not stop, nor did she let the guards by her side catch the man. She looked at Hayden's back, her expression silent. After a while, she set off immediately, with her guards, flew to the sky above the Fisherman Island, independent of a soap bubble outside the Fisherman Island soap bubble, which is the location of the Dragon Palace King city of Fisherman Island. Because seeing Princess Odahime appeared, Hayden had a very bold idea in his heart, so he said that to the former Princess Odahime. Back to the White Dragon fleet. The thoughts that suddenly rose in his heart made it difficult for him to calm down, and the more he wanted to suppress it, it was like pouring a big bucket of gasoline on the flame of thought in his heart, even becoming more violent and more passionate. At the same time. In the Dragon Palace Kingdom directly above the Fisherman Island, Princess Uhime, who returned to the Dragon Palace, did not immediately tell her husband, the king of the Dragon Palace Kingdom Neptune, about the mysterious man who had just met Hayden. But after that, she found a place to think for a while alone. Advertisement. I kept thinking back to the words Hayden said to her just now, which meant to her as if a greedy person suddenly saw a large pile of gold coins in front of him. Odahime didn't think much about it. Then she called her 3 sons, the 3 Neptune brothers. The boss, the shark. The second, the emperor. And the third, the sunshine. You go to the port to find a fleet of white dragons, and then invite a human named Smog to come to Dragon Palace as a guest. He wears a hat on his head, a robe, and 2 knives on his waist. Yes, my mother. The 3 Neptune brothers immediately agreed to Mother Dao's request. But, after agreeing, they did not leave immediately. As the eldest son among them, Boss Shark hesitated and said, "Mother, this is." The second eldest star and the third dazzling star, the 2 of them also had this question at the same time. When Princess Odahime heard this question, she didn't know why she was invited. Could it be that a stranger you met on the street could bring her what she had always expected? Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Although the person seemed unusual, it was so difficult to achieve what she wanted to achieve. On the contrary, if what the person said is true, then what price will she have to pay if she wants to achieve it? Everything has its own price. The more difficult things you want to achieve, the higher the price will follow. When you bring that person to Dragon Palace City, you will know. Princess Odahime told her 3 sons vaguely. After the words were over, regardless of the reaction of the 3 of them, she went directly to her husband's current location and told him this in advance. Port of Murloc Island. the mooring location of the White Dragon fleet. Advertisement. Hayden, who came back from a stroll, went directly into his cabin and quietly waited for the news from Princess Odahime. Although it is the first time to do this kind of thing, pretend to be a ghost. But with his words just now, coupled with the sway that Ryotsu gave her, the Princess Odahime should come here to look for him. Hayden was a little unsure about this, but also a little nervous. Because the appearance of Princess Odahime in front of him just now was his opportunity, and generally speaking, the opportunity is not something you can meet right away if you want to. If he missed this time, he would not have the initiative in his hands instead if he found the door on his own. And this is not just the reason for the initiative, but also because there is no more suitable situation to start the next event than the situation just now. The waiting period passed quickly. When Hayden began to feel some real anxiety, there was a sudden commotion on the deck outside the cabin. "Here," Hayden murmured, and then got up to get out of the cabin. Fishman Island port at this moment. In the midair of the harbor, there was an anchovy boat that was only owned by the royal family on the Fisherman Island. It looks like a huge octopus, with a bubble-wrapped hull on the fish string, and on the hull, there are 3 characters, Dragon Palace City. Do-do-do-do-do. After a burst of royal horns, the 3 princes of Neptune are here. The crowded movement immediately attracted all the Murlocs and mermaids near the port, and everyone's eyes were focused on the 3 shadows on the anchovy boat. That's the 3 princes of Neptune. What are the royal people doing in this port? The Murlocs and mermaids in the harbor suddenly began to discuss in a low voice. After all, royal ponytail boats rarely appear, but today I don't know how they came to the port. Advertisement. Excuse me, is the human named Smog here? Shark stood on the bow of the ponytail, looking down at Captain Gerard, who was standing on the deck. Seeing these 3 crew members who are all human, he doesn't need to ask if this is the White Dragon fleet. And Captain Gerard, who heard this question, was not only a little startled by the person asking him, but also shocked by the question at the same time. The royal family of Murloc Island, what did you find that Smog for? This question popped up in Gerard's heart, and then he immediately left it behind. That man is on this boat. He replied immediately after thinking for a moment, pointing to the cabin behind him. Very well, please call out the man named Samoj. He was invited by Princess Odahime and immediately followed us to the Dragon Palace as a guest. There was no change in the expression on Shark's face, and he continued. The voice fell, not only on the deck of the White Dragon fleet, but also spread around the port. Everyone in the court heard clearly, and everyone was stunned at this moment. The noble Royal Highness Odahime is now inviting a human who has never heard of it to be a guest in the Dragon Palace King City. Who is the human named Smog? Why would His Highness Odahime specially ask the 3 princes of Neptune to invite him? The Murlocs and mermaids in the port suddenly began to talk. In this situation, inviting a human to the Dragon Palace King City is not a trivial matter. But Gerard on the deck immediately came back to his senses. He knew that the name was Smog, probably not his real name, Hayden, very unusual. However, his previous performance did not look like he had been to Fishman Island. Moreover, he just went out on the Fisherman Island, and he hasn't been shopping for a long time. Why did the people of the Fisherman Island royal family come to invite him as a guest? Chapter 248. Meet the King of Murloc Island. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Then, right on the deck, the crew of the White Dragon fleet, with a surprised expression, Hayden's figure slowly walked out of the ship's hatch. At the same time, the appearance of the figure also made the 3 Neptune brothers look towards the position of the cabin. Wearing a hat and robe with 2 knives around his waist. Is that the person your mother said? Shark frowned and thought to himself, he didn't know how this human who dared not show his face had his mother raised up the idea of inviting him to be a guest in the Dragon Palace. Smog? Shark shouted in the direction of Hayden, confirming whether the person came was the one he was looking for. Hayden, who walked out of the cabin, did not respond immediately, nor did he look up at the person who was looking down at him in the air, and did not show his face. Seeing Wenzu and perceiving the situation ahead, he immediately noticed that there were 3 people coming, and several people who were weaker than these 3. Standing on the boat behind the 3, they should be guards. And those 3 people seemed to be the 3 princes of Fishman Island. Hayden thought about it in his mind, and with a few memories of Murloc Island, he came to this guess. After that, he didn't think much, and still didn't speak. Huh. Howery on Hayden slammed across the air, making a popping sound. What? The three brothers who focused their eyes on Hayden, and the crew of the White Dragon fleet on deck, exclaimed at the same time. Because when all of them were waiting for Hayden to speak, Hayden in his sight did not speak, but his figure suddenly disappeared on the deck on which he was standing, before all of them had time to react. Advertisement. Let's go. The disappeared Hayden suddenly faintly floated behind the three Neptune brothers. Okay. The three Neptune brothers turned their heads abruptly, and none of them even noticed this person's approach. And the crew of the White Dragon fleet on the deck, at the same moment, they noticed Hayden, who was still on their deck in the last second, and suddenly, it seemed as if he had moved to the wind stern ship in the air in an instant. The three Neptune brothers were silent for a second, and the eldest shark of the three of them spoke to Hayden, who suddenly appeared next to them. Mr. Smog, please get on the boat, we will now go to the Dragon Palace King City. Then, under the gaze of all the people on the Fisherman Island in the port and all the crew of the White Dragon fleet, Hayden, the mysterious human, boarded the Royal Anchovy boat and went straight to the Dragon Palace in the sky. Above the entrance of Dragon Palace City, between the big bubble on the Fisherman Island and the small bubble on the Dragon Palace, there is a circular gate made of material like steel. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After Shark pressed a button on the gate to inform him of his identity, the Dragon Palace King City controlled the passage and immediately put down the connecting passage. By the way, take this. The shark who returned to the phoenix-tailed boat took out a piece of coral and threw it to Hayden in front of him. This is a bubble coral, which can easily make bubbles. Next, in the Dragon Palace King City, it is not suitable for your human survival. Hayden's figure flickered, and he steadily caught the thrown coral. Pressing the top of the coral in his hand, a transparent bubble immediately expanded from the coral, covering his body in less than 2 seconds. After that, after visiting a long scenic avenue of Longgungwangcheng, Hayden looked up and saw Longgung City right in front of him. Advertisement: a golden dragon occupies the castle of the combination of Chinese and Western style. There are all kinds of strange fish swimming in the surrounding seawater, and even the light shining on the Dragon Palace seems very psychedelic. Riding on the anchovy boat of the Neptune brothers and Hayden, ascended the long giant stairs, and finally stopped in front of an overly exaggerated golden gate. After seeing the arrival of the ponytail, the door seemed to have an automatic induction, and then slowly opened. Then, an unusually empty hall appeared in front of Hayden. The hall is still full of seawater, and the overall walls are made of blue close to the ocean. On both sides of the hall, there are 2 long lines of guards standing. And at the end of this long line, there is a throne the size of a hill, on which is sitting impressively the king of Murloc Island, which is 10,000 meters deep under the sea Neptune. Even though the doorway where Hayden is standing is still a long way from the throne, he can still feel the size of the king of the Fisherman Island. King Neptune. Princess Odahime. At this moment, under the gaze of the 3 Neptune brothers, Hayden, who came to the throne, gestured to the 2 most powerful people on the Fisherman Island. However, he still did not take off his hat. Sitting on the throne, Neptune didn't care what the humans would call them. He stared at Hayden calmly and said, "Humans, you should understand what the things I said to Princess Odahime before represent." Neptune's voice was dull in the sea like waves of thunder. Princess Odahime on the side did not speak. Her eyes were like a pair of copper bells, staring straight at Hayden hidden in the hat, as if trying to feel the emotions of a mysterious person through the hat. Hayden thought about what to say next. After a moment of silence, his head moved slightly to the left and right. "King Neptune, I think only you and Princess Odahime will know about the next thing, which is better." "No way." Advertisement: Neptune and Princess Odahime hadn't reacted yet, but the 3 Neptune brothers on the side had reacted slightly more intensely. Leaving aside the true intentions of this human being, just because this person dared not show his face, let the 3 Neptune brothers worry about the safety of the father and mother. Besides, this person was so close that the 3 of them didn't even react just now. Now, how could they let the father and mother stay in the same space with this person alone? At the same time, the guards on both sides did not agree with Hayden's idea, which seemed to be wrong. At this moment, when the atmosphere dropped suddenly, boom, Hayden's spiritual pressure spread instantly. As if in this space full of seawater, an impossible gust of wind was set off, and the seawater was evacuated in all directions. The seawater in the hall was immediately muddled by Hayden's spiritual pressure, churning out countless bubbles. After a while, the sea in the hall gradually calmed down. Neptune and Princess Odahime, still maintaining their composure, stared straight at Hayden in front of them. They all know that the movement just now is the influence of this mysterious person. At the same time, this movement immediately changed the original idea in Neptune's mind. "You all get back." Neptune looked at the guards on both sides and ordered, then looked at his 3 sons. "You too," he continued without question. Then, in the entire Dragon Palace Hall, only Hayden, King Neptune, and Princess OG were left. Chapter 249 Ignite the World. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. You may know me, or you may forget me. Hayden put his hand on the hat on his head. "This next thing may scare you a bit, but first, I came here with good intentions. Explain beforehand." The faint words of the mysterious man made Neptune and Princess Odahime in a puzzle. What is this human being talking about? Both of them frowned and thought. After that, Hayden didn't continue to play the gods and make ghosts anymore, and with his right hand resting on the hat, he immediately took the hat from the top of his head. There was a refreshing black hair, a left eye wearing a black eye mask, a sharp face like a knife, and a terrifying scar on his side cheek. There was a gleam of determination in his eyes. Neptune and Princess Odahime knew from the eyes of this mysterious person that this human being is definitely not a character like a liar. Maybe this human really has. Only, after the second glance, both of them felt that this human face seemed a bit familiar to them. Both Neptune and Princess Odahime stared at Hayden's real face and fell into puzzlement again. Hayden looked at the expressions of the 2 people in front of him who were still thinking. It seemed that 3 years' time would really make some things fade away. He thought to himself, he didn't intend to remind the 2 of them. Then, maybe 2 or 3 seconds have not passed. The expression on King Neptune's face suddenly changed greatly. He looked at Hayden in his eyes as if he had seen a ghost-like figure. His eyes widened, showing an expression of disbelief. Immediately afterwards, Princess Odahime next to Neptune changed the expression on her face following that of Neptune. The expressions of the couple at this moment can almost be described with a mold. "Are you the one from 3 years ago?" Advertisement. King Neptune, sitting on the throne, carefully chose his words, and said in a deep voice to Hayden, who was in front of him, probably less than 10 meters away. Following the main person's face that shocked the world 3 years ago, Neptune and Odahime gradually recalled and became clear in their minds. Although the human being in front of me is a little different from the photos in the newspaper at that time, this human being is definitely the man who shocked the world in the first place. "It seems you remembered it." Hayden smiled slightly on his face. "Although things were a bit different from what I wanted back then, things are like that now." Hayden held the hat in front of his chest, and renewed his tribute to the King Neptune in front of him and Princess Odahime next to him. King Neptune, Princess Odahime. In order to increase the atmosphere, he paused briefly. "My name is Hayden. Which is the person you think of in your mind now?" He calmly stated his true identity. "What? You?" King Neptune and Princess Odahime exclaimed at the same time. Even a second ago, there was still a trace of uncertainty in their hearts, but now the person in front of them had directly indicated their identity, and that trace of uncertainty was immediately annihilated. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The world government, not yet. Neptune asked without thinking about it, and then immediately asked. But stopped his own problem. If the world government catches this person, there is absolutely no chance for him to escape again. Hayden snorted with a shrug. Fortunately to escape the world government. "Then why did you come to our fisherman island?" King Neptune thought of the consequences of being discovered that the world's #1 criminal had appeared on their fisherman island, and immediately asked with a stern tone. "What do you mean by what you said before?" Advertisement. Princess Odahime's question also shot at Hayden at an extremely fast speed. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly dropped at this moment. However, Hayden probably thought that these 2 people would react this way. "Relax." Hayden motioned to the 2 people in front of him to calm down. "What I said in the square before is what I mean in the literal sense." He didn't panic at all, telling both Neptune and Odahime. "You know, if I tell the world government, What will you end up with, human? Neptune, who was carrying a country on his back, said to Hayden in the most serious tone. If what the human being said next is not what he thought, then he might as well inform the world government directly. Although they're Fishman Island and the world government, the relationship with humans is not good. But if someone finds out that this person appears on their Fisherman Island, the consequences will not be able to bear the consequences. At this moment, Princess Odahime also looked at Hayden with the same solemn expression, waiting for his next words. I know, but I also believe that you won't spread my news after listening. Hayden smiled, ignoring the threat in Neptune's words. As you know, 3 years ago, as a navy, I killed 2 dragonites. Although I don't want things to develop to that point, I now have a reward of 1 billion yuan. As long as the world government, the Tianlong people, are not completely destroyed, the reward will always be on my head. However, since the 3 years of fleeing, it is not just fleeing. Again, in order to increase the atmosphere, Hayden stopped talking here. And so? King Neptune asked Hayden anxiously. Hayden brewed his emotions, nodded and continued. Advertisement. In the past 3 years, I have traveled many places, seen many things, and met many people. I met a little girl who was sold to a trafficker by her biological mother because her family could not afford food. I have seen human traffickers handcuffing various people collected from all over the world to their collars and treating them as being inferior to animals. I have also seen the demise of a village, the corruption of a country. Hayden said this in one breath, and he had to pause for a while. And what caused these? After Hayden asked, he immediately replied. These are not only caused by the pirates. The dragon people, the world government, they are basically the same. In short, I said so many things, I just want to tell you. I am ready to form an alliance to unite the oppressed people around the world, set off a worldwide revolution, and kindle a raging fire. Hayden suddenly put his true thoughts before the king and princess of Murloc Island. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly fell silent. The words spoken by the humans in front of them really made King Neptune and Princess Odahime unable to react to each other in the first place. Revolution? A sound that shook the water came from Neptune's mouth? Neptune, who recovered from the shock, exclaimed, Human, do you know what you were talking about just now? Princess Odahime on the side followed to express her thoughts. What you said is really. She thought for a long time, but couldn't find words that accurately described this human being. Chapter 250 Historical Point in Time Previous Chapter. Next chapter advertisement. I know. Hayden answered seriously. Although the passage just now was not what he saw in the past 3 years, it was also a real thing he encountered during his naval time. Upset the world. These 4 words are very simple. But if he wants to achieve these 4 meanings, Hayden can't do it alone. For the past 3 years, he has been immersing himself in training, and at the same time, he has to avoid the search by the world government. He has not been in the world and invited them to join this action. However, he is out now, and he intends to use the Fisherman Island as the first place for this action. After Murloc Island agreed, he went to get the heavenly gold, and then traveled all over the world one by one. Even though Hayden's first intention after he came up with this idea was to offer Robin as his reward, the 2 of them solved their own problems. However, while he himself was talking to the king of Murloc Island and Princess Odahime, Hayden remembered his thoughts when he first met the pirates killing ordinary people. Since you have the ability to bring something beautiful to the world, why not do it? Hayden seemed to have found another target next. King Neptune, Princess Odahime. Hayden then said to the 2 surprised faces. What I said will definitely happen, and it will happen. After that, Murloc Island can move to land at will. On. I believe that all beings are equal, and human beings, Murlocs, and mermaids, except for their physical appearance and living environment are somewhat different. In everyone's hearts, they are actually the same. Human, the invitation you gave, I still can't decide for a while. Advertisement King Neptune listened to this passionate speech and looked at the confident human beings in front of him. He actually had a slight movement about this whimsical action. However, as the king of all Fishman Island, he couldn't agree to such an important thing so easily. And Princess Odahime, listening to Hayden's actions, she had always wanted to live in peace with humans, and she had a strong urge to agree to it. But again, the matter was too important, and she immediately stopped the expression of emotions. Both of them probably knew Hayden's strength 3 years ago. The photos reported in the newspaper at the time, the tragic situation of the Chambord Islands. If there is no certain strength, how can it be stalemate with the Admiral and other characters to create that kind of scene? This human being alone was able to escape from the killing of 2 Tianlong people, and also escape from the hands of the Navy and the world government, and lived unharmed for 3 years. This alone can well explain the strength of this human being. If you can really unite people from all over the world, as he said, maybe that goal is not so far away. At this time, seeing that there was no expression on both faces, Hayden was going to continue saying that if they didn't agree to join this time, then next time, he would have to wait until he returns from the New World. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. King Neptune, Princess Odahime. Now is a brand new opportunity before you. The historical carriage has been parked on your fisherman island, and it depends on whether you can seize the opportunity to get on the car. After Hayden finished speaking, he put the hat back on his head and made an intention to leave. Wait. Neptune subconsciously kept him from speaking, but Hayden, who turned slightly, interrupted his words. But this is the only thing I must complete, and I can definitely complete it. The period fell. Hayden, who put on his hat again, planned to leave Dragon Palace City directly. Neptune did not stop Hayden, nor did Princess Odahime. At this time, the two looked at each other's eyes and found that the meanings revealed in their eyes were all equally complicated. Advertisement on the one hand, this human proposal is too whimsical. On the other hand, the tone of the human being when he spoke, the temperament that he exudes, and even though the human being did not show any signs of strength, it still made the two of them feel that there is infinite power hidden in his body. All these made them feel in the bottom of their hearts that it seems that this thing can be done, but at the same time, the mood in their hearts is also very complicated. So, the two of them just like this, looking straight at Hayden's back, walked out of the gate of Longgung City in the distance. After some time passed, Hayden didn't make more stops in Dragon Palace, he went straight back to the White Dragon Fleet in the port of Fishman Island. As a result of the matter, of course he had thought in advance that it was very likely to be like this. Moreover, if it is the king of Fishman Island, he agrees when he hears his proposal for the first time, then he should consider whether to pull the Fishman Island and join him in his action. But, gone. If it succeeds once, that would be great. However, this time it was not useless, at least he was familiar with the Fisherman Island royal family. As for the king and princess of Murloc Island, will they reveal their news? He believed that the king of Murloc Island understood the world government and the urinary nature of the dragon people. If he had passed the news to them himself, he would just open the door of his own home and let the people of the world government come in casually. After that, the stay on the Fisherman Island passed smoothly. Although I just passed by the Fisherman Island, I have seen a mermaid and ignited a special flame in my heart. Although the last thing was not agreed, but in general, it is still possible. Advertisement. Hayden boarded the ships of the White Dragon Fleet and continued to set out for his final destination, the New World. After all, the problem of heavenly gold is now his primary goal that needs to be solved in this period of time. According to the information obtained before, now Doflamingo hid the celestial gold in a place after robbing him, and now he is arguing with the world government and the dragon people. In other words, they are still in a stalemate. No one moved, nor did the gold in the sky. However, these things will change in a short time. If he delays for a few more days, Hayden doesn't want to. After he has spent his time rushing to the New World, the heavenly gold has been returned to the Tinlongren by Doflamingo. After leaving the range of Murloc Island, under the command of the White Dragon Fleet captain who is familiar with this route. Soon, the White Dragon Fleet jumped out of the sea, and arrived at the second half of the famous Great Route, the most difficult and dangerous sea area of the New World. As soon as they jumped out of the sea, they received the warmest welcome from the New World, which was even more violent than the previous storm in the Paradise Waters. The turbulent ocean current shuttled under this storm, and the thunderous thunder exploded in the black clouds. The Spanish galleon at the foot, a ship more majestic than a castle, could not hold the hull in this storm at all. Constantly being beaten by the waves, producing violent shaking. Is this the New World? Hayden stood on the bow, watching the scene like the end of the world before him, thinking. When he was in the Navy, he took the passage of the world government to the New World once, but he did not intuitively feel the danger of the New World like this moment.